it. Here it goes. And that's one by Canterbury with a half-back kid getting his past to Doyle. Doyle decides to slip through. He's broken away from Mile, broken away from the captain, tackled by Scott, and picked up by...
We're the up-and-coming berries, and we take to show a score. Our strength and skill that gives the will to match the final four. Don Elton sell his Rapidos, and the rest he'll give for free, while the berries show just what they know with machine-like harmony.
Rugby league began in England. It was called the Northern Union game for many, many decades, but it began in 1894 in Lancashire and Yorkshire. Players were quite angry with the rugby, not only for their arrogance, but for not allowing any compensation for time off through injury. It became a major problem, and the game virtually started at the George Hotel in Huddersfield, where players got together, and it grew quite considerably. And one of the things, in their first games, they stayed with rugby union rules. They played, they had the same scoring, the same rules, and it wasn't until they changed that many in the population there in the Midlands of England started to like the new game. It took quite some time for Australia to latch onto the game, and it was 1907 when one of our great cricketers, Victor Trumper, and his friend James Gilton, they saw an opportunity. I'm sure it was Gilton who was really an entrepreneur. Trumper, I think, liked to be in anything to do that anybody that rebelled, well, Trumper was going to be part of it, and they decided that for rugby league to be successful in Australia, they needed the best player, and that was Dally Messenger. And there's the story that both Trumper and Gilton went to Double Bay, and they knew that the best way to get Dally was to go and see his mum, Annie, and they spent some time there one night just trying to talk Annie into suggesting that her son should become a rugby league player, and at the end of the night she supported their views that the same problems that England had, Australia had. There was no compensation for being off through injury, and the players felt it was time that they did something about it. The interesting thing is that neither in England nor in Australia did they really want to have a professional game. It just came about by the fact that that's how it developed. But in the initial stages, they were not after something professional. They just wanted to be compensated, which they thought was their right. The Canterbury area before rugby league started was ostensibly agricultural, farming, and I guess the guys that lived there, the men who would later play rugby league, were the tough timber getters and farmers. And the main areas of Canterbury were Belmore, Bankstown, and Canterbury itself, and the place where most jobs were quite gettable were at the sugar processing mills. And the mill was just on the Cooks River, just next to where the Canterbury racecourse is today. And rugby league sort of grew fairly quickly in the area, and it was a time when gangs would get together, but evidently they'd hop on the train at Central and use the first carriage as their battleground, and the gangs from Belmore and Bankstown. So there was a fair amount of rivalry, and they were pretty tough times. And the best way for getting around in those days, particularly for teams going anywhere, was by horse-drawn cart. And I think most of them seemed to congregate around the Belmore station.
The game took a brief pause after the brilliant period of August 1907, the formation of a rugby league, the signing of Messenger, etc. And it was, but the early months of 1908 were the football scene in Sydney was a hive of activity, and in January, February that year, the rugby league clubs were formed, which pretty much covered the north, south, and east and west of the city. 7 clubs were formed. And then entrepreneurs behind the game, James Gilton and Henry Hoyle and company, managed to convince Newcastle to come into the competition as well. So rugby league had the 8-team competition it needed to get going in 1908. That 8 teams became 9 teams when Cumberland were briefly added in the second round. And with hopes high and fingers crossed, I would imagine, the game got off the ground in that year. The game had a great entrepreneurial feeling about it from that year, 1908. Maori team came and played in Sydney. New Zealand came and played test matches. At the end of that first year, the first Kangaroos boarded the SS Macedonia and steamed off for a tour which would encompass 45 games in England. remarkable tour, really, which set the platform for that international football would be part of the rugby league story forevermore, which it certainly has been. The only other team changes in that the decade that followed, Annandale was invited in 1910. Cumberland disappeared straight away after 1908. There was a very brief flurry. They were gone. Newcastle played for 2 years and then they left in 1910. So Annandale virtually took their place.
I was born in Chapel Street, Marrickville, and there was a school, a big school, in Chapel Street.
When was this? What year was this?
I was born in 1912. And I went to that school, done all my schooling there, and but during the 17 plague, that school was used as a hospital.
Yeah, a very significant decision by Rugby League in 1914-15 that the game would play on, that the game would not, despite pressure for it to suspend its competition, which was a decision taken by the Rugby Union. The two games then were in very bitter opposition. That point needs to be made, I think, that there was a lot of feeling which has existed pretty much down the years, almost to recent times, probably not so much these days. But Rugby League played on, Rugby Union didn't. Rugby League had, in the framework of a country at war, had reasonably successful years during the war years, providing some solace, entertainment for the people, a troubled nation, and played on and came out of the war years strengthened game, whereas Rugby Union had to virtually start all over again in the years of the 1920s.
Canterbury didn't have a junior league in those days, and they were forced to play in the St George area. And evidently the Belmore Rockleys were among the best junior sides of that time. From then on, it moved on a bit. I think they formed their own junior rugby league in 1921, and they had teams from Bankstown, Punchbowl, further teams from Belmore, and they started off with A, B and C grades in their first competition, which was, and 7 clubs were involved, which indicated that they were ripe for the game.
Everywhere you went, you made friends. I had friends from one end of it to the other, and it was a good place for people that like sport. There was a lot of sporting things there. There's tennis courts and whatever you wanted was there. And that Riverside Park was a big park there. We played football and that there, cricket there, everything.
So there was eight in our family. I was the eldest of 8, and we went through that big depression that we fed on bread and jam for a long while, you know, and know what else I can say about it, but we had hard times, and as I said, I worked on a milk cart to get a few bob for my mother, and I finished up going to sleep after time. They used to send me home, so I never had much of an education. It was all the hard times. Well, what am I going back to? 1928. Well, that's 28, but I was 12 years old. I went to Lakemba School. That's where I was reared, at Lakemba School, and there was no rail stations then. No one unheard of. But there was a rail station at Punchbowl and Bankstown. Other than that, working class suburb, yes, it was so. My dad was on the PMG, and he was a working suburb then all along. So I lived in Lakemba, Canterbury Street, Lakemba. Dad was a wharf service home. He used to walk from Lakemba, Wiley Park, to Belmore Oval.
The Chapel Street School didn't play league, so we played soccer. And I was fortunate enough to get a trip to Adelaide in 1926 with the schoolboy soccer over there. And when we come back, I started to play junior soccer, but soccer was underage. And every team used to have blokes that use young brother certificates and things like that to be underage. And it was argument. Every week you go down and hear arguments about ages, you know. And I said, oh, this is going to be on all the while I'm going to get out and play league. And that's how I sold me togs. I said my togs cost me 18 threepence, haven't had threepence for a while, have you? 18 threepence, and I sold them for 10 bob and went and played league.
Between 1921, when I was born, and 1928, we lived with my mother's parents at 44 to 46 Chalmers Street, Belmore. It was a double block of land, and my grandparents and my parents, of course, used to grow vegetables, which were sold to the local produce store, had a heap of poultry, and the eggs were also sold to some of the local shopkeepers, and the balance was used to sustain our family. My grandfather was a hand-sewn bootmaker. He had a workroom in the back of the house where he used to make boots, and I, as a kid, used to sit and watch him do all the work. As a consequence, I've got a great recollection of the way shoes are made. But of course, during those days, it was coming up towards the Depression. There wasn't a lot of money about, and shoes were a rarity. At one stage, my grandfather had a great deal of difficulty getting any sort of work at all to sustain the place, and it was only the fact that they maintained the vegetable gardens and the poultry that I think kept us in reasonably good health and with reasonably good food.
Yeah, the 1920s were a time of change for the game. New clubs came in, Sydney Uni and St George came in, Annandale went out at the start of the decade, and towards the end of the decade, Glebe, first club formed in 1908, they were also voted out by just one vote, a decision of the New South Wales Rugby League that they'd run their course. Controversial, of course, but Rugby League, as always, was a work in progress, and that decision was taken. From
1930, Canterbury, the officials of Canterbury area felt they were ready for first-grade rugby league, and their first attempt came in 1930. And in all these, you need some really passionate, strong officials and administrators to carry you. And in those days, Canterbury had Frank Miller, who later became their first secretary. George Russell, who was the brother of the famous boxer Russell, who'd won the Olympic gold medal and played for Newtown and was part of the rebellion and came into when the rugby union players switched to rugby league. The Johnson brothers, and there were many of those sort of people who were so important to the growth of Canterbury in those years. Of course, with Prisoners' Cup was a very big thing, and was for many years later, but it was very big in those years, that your best junior players wanted to play Prisoners' Cup, and Canterbury won it in 1931, and which obviously suggested they had some many good juniors, and while they didn't win it for quite some time later, that probably was a springboard to them going into first grade rugby league.
I left soccer in 31, played league in 31. As I say, I played juniors, then in the President's Cup, then had a President's Cup in Newtown and played 6 third-grade games, and the last 3 in first grade. Played centre in them days. Centre.
Around about that time, the Governor of New South Wales, Sir Philip Game, dismissed the Lang government, and I remember how upset my father was, and during those elections, when we used to wear Lang is right badges, Frank and I were allowed to go out in bare feet and put the Dodgers in the letterbox advocating the return of the Lang party to power.
I was 15, 16. I played for Lakemba Juniors.
Well, it was very poor pay, I can tell you that. I got married in 1931, and at the end of the season I got £17.10, and £5 of that was a wedding present. That's how much I heard of football in days. There was no money.
Fortunate enough in living in a chap named Tedder Courtney, one of the greatest rugby league players that ever played for Western Suburbs, and I was lucky next door, and I got a lot of information from Ted, from the boy. He thought I was just Johnny, you know. He really liked me.
It was more the fact that the Canterbury were going to encroach on Western Suburbs as area. And it takes a bit of time to prove that you're ready too. That was the other thing.
So it wasn't easy to get in, was it?
Oh, no. No, that was just... I think it was 2 years to get all the information necessary to get in. It took them about 2 years to get all that together.
The residential qualification was very simple, is that you had to play for the club in which you lived, the district in which you lived. So if you lived in the Canterbury district, you had to play for Canterbury. If you lived in Newtown, you had to play for Newtown.
When we went to secondary school, my brother Frank and I used to travel by train from Belmore into St James Station, where we used to work across Hyde Park through St Mary's Cathedral to St Mary's Cathedral Christian Brothers School. While walking across Hyde Park, that would have been around the early 1930s, the Archibald Fountain in Hyde Park was under construction. Well, we couldn't see all the details because even after it was constructed and opened, the brothers weren't too keen on us looking at the Archibald Fountain because of the fact that there was a number of unclothed males there. But one of the good things that I've always appreciated about the brothers, they taught us to play rugby league football.
In 1933-34, Kangaroos played a match in Paris against Britain, which led to the formation of the French Rugby League, and France has been an integral part of the international scene ever since.
Mr Miller, I used to call him them days. Mr Miller, he was in charge of the Canterbury Bankstown. Frank Miller and Fred John Say were the driving force. They held a meeting at KMC, the chemist shop. We went to there, and that's where they formed Canterbury Bankstown. They never had a proper ground. We never got a ground until we got Belmore Oval.
The year 1935 was pretty special in Canterbury history. It was their first year in rugby league, of course, and it was they'd been the first team in since St George came in 1921. And I guess one of the good things about Canterbury coming in was that they had a number of players already ready to play for them, because in coming in they encroached on Western Suburbs area, and because the residential rule forced players to play for the club of their residents, they had 4 or 5 of the Western Suburbs' best players, and among them was a hooker called Bob Linfield, who in those days winning the scrums was almost as important as scoring a try, and he was a wonderful winner of the ball as an outstanding hooker. And they had Frank Sponberg, who was still rated by, in times of those who had seen him play, he said he was probably the toughest tackler even today they'd ever seen. He was a lock forward who never played for Australia but would have gone close. And O'Connell and a few other of those of Western Suburbs players made Canterbury, well, what they thought was going to be a fairly strong side.
Frank Miller, Tommy Johns, the Russells, they're the ones that started the Canterbury Bankstown Rugby League. They got Sponberg from Western Suburbs. They got Bluey McConnell from Western Suburbs. First team we played in the competition was North Sydney. I was in second grade that day. I played 2 games in second grade, and then I played another one, three games, and I was always first grade as Canterbury Bankstown. When I was only 18, I got picked in the first grade side, and I was there ever since.
What position did you play, Eddie?
Front row. Never anything else, only front row.
Where were you born?
Ringham.
And when were you born?
Or 1913. Yes, I played all over the place. Inside and outside centre, and I played on the wing. I remember my first game at North Sydney. I took an intercept. I thought they were pretty slow off the mark when the ball comes out. I nearly scored that. There was the fastest winger that the other side had. He took all the skin off my leg.
They played North Sydney in their first match and lost it 20-5. It was 10-5 at half time, so it wasn't a bad start. But it turned out to be a fairly horrific year, with St George beating them 91-6 in one game, and the following week Eastern Suburbs beat them 87-7, and the great Dave Brown scored 45 points in that one game, which is still a rugby league record. They did win 2 games. They beat University 21-2 in their first game and first round, and I think they won by a point in the second round. They still beat University, so they finished up without the wooden spoon, but probably, when you look at the whole year, a fairly disappointing year.
We beat University. They're the team we beat in 1935. Each team beat us. Gives us a bloody big eye in there for sure.
I was told that it was a 2-year period that I could stay with Newtown or play with Canterbury for the next 2 years. And I thought, well, I'm going to finish in Canterbury. I might as well go straight there. It was simple as that for me to make the decision. And it wasn't a team that you'd want to be rushing to join either. They were getting beat by cricket scores.
Well, I got £12 in 35. That was my earnings from the rugby league. £12.
I knew 2 or 3 that was going to join. I played with Henry Porter. He come from back from Goulburn, and I played with him in juniors. In fact, we was in the same President's Cup team together. And I knew he was coming, and I knew 2 or 3 more players that was coming from the bush, and that. And I thought, well, you never know. Might be all right.
In the second year, 1936, Canterbury earned the title the Country Bumpkins, mainly because of the number of country players they recruited. They obviously, after their first year, decided that they needed to go out and purchase, if you like, purchase players or entice them to come to the club. And they did a remarkably good job. They got Tommy Kirk, the outstanding goal-kicking fullback. He came from Tumut. Henry Porter, who would later form a great front-row relationship with other players that came to the club. While he had been a Newtown player, he was playing in Goulburn. But they all signed. Alan Brady, while he wasn't from the country, Brady came across from Western Suburbs, and of course he captained the side, a wonderful centre. And they were among a group of very, very good players. But to come to the club, but most of them had come from the country, so they were also called the Cantabs and other names, but they earned the title the Country Bumpkins from 1936.
He was known as the Prince of Bookers. His name was Roy Kirkcaldy. And that was the main reason why we started to be competitive with other teams. Because Kirkcaldy used to get us sometimes 80%, at least 75% of the ball from every scrum. The other 12 in the team, he gives them a chance to play. And you can only play good football with the ball.
About 1936, I remember watching a game on Belmore Oval when Canterbury were playing Newtown. Newtown had a winger, Athol Stewart, who subsequently played for the state. And Athol was tremendously fast. He was marking Joe Gartner, and of course Joe was a great stepper, had great coordination. Joe wasn't nearly as fast as Athol, but the ball came out to Joe. Joe stepped Athol first up, got about, I suppose, 10, 15 yards away from him. Athol turned and chased him. Joe must have sensed he was coming, and he stepped, and Athol ran past him. And in running past him, he interfered with the full back. While they were sorting themselves out, Joe headed off again, and the pair of them chased him, and Joe managed to sidestep and push off the pair and put the ball down in the corner. A really exciting game.
If you read all there is to read about Frank Burge, you would probably rate him among the greats of Australian rugby league as a forward. He was a second rower who they say should have toured with the Australian team at the age of 14. But more than that, he had an enormous knowledge of rugby league and was able to impart it. And later became, he was coach of Canterbury in those early days. I think Ted Courtney had the first year. But Burge came on in 1936, and he was a fitness fanatic, Burge, and if nothing else, Canterbury were going to be the fittest team.
He coached us, and we finished up. We was playing Eastern Suburbs in the semi-final in 1936.
Another game I remember particularly, it was, I think it was a 1936 semi-final, and it was played on Belmore Oval. That was something unusual. East played, and the captain of East was Dave Brown, who was really quite an outstanding footballer. And Dave Brown cut Canterbury to ribbons that day. We were terribly disappointed because we were quite hopeful that Canterbury would make a game of it, but unfortunately for Canterbury, Brown played so brilliantly that East won quite comfortably.
In 1938, they were premiers. They had Alan Brady as captain. They developed a fairly strong team through Burge, and most of those players in 36 were there in 38. And they beat Balmain, and East were the two strongest clubs in those years. They beat Balmain in the semi-finals, and they beat East 19-6 in the final. They were minor premiers by 5 points. I mean, that's an amazing when you consider what 1935 was like.
They had great forwards, Canterbury, like Louis McCannell and Henry, Swanberg. They were really the great forwards, they were.
I was that proud to be playing with a bunch of forwards that we had. They had two Pierces, Norval, Steer. The team of internationals who was their forwards, and our blokes more than held their own with them. And I was very proud to be associated with them. But that 6 players. And McCarter, of course, he played like a forward that day too.
When did you score your 2 tries?
It was a quarter of an hour to go. Their fullback kicked the ball to the open wing, which was his mistake. I was on the open wing, and I just caught it on the run. And he had a few blokes in front of me to sidestep it. Next thing I was over the line. That was that one. I think it was a team effort, the second one. I've got an idea it might have been Frank Sponberg made a run, and I come in and called for it of him. And so I stepped to the last bloke or something and scored. I know it was paper. Paper had what I scored. Both times I'd sidestep to score them.
Henry Porter, Kakul and myself, we played in the front row. If we dropped out, if me and Porter never played, they couldn't find Kakul. He used to go to races. He only played when Burns and Kakul and Porter played.
That's why they called you the Three Musketeers?
3 Musketeers, yeah.
Eddie Burns is a front row forward that could run like a back. I've seen blokes backs in the opposition side try and run around Eddie, and Eddie would force them halfway across the field before they'd ever get around him. He could run pretty well. For a front row forward, he was a very fast runner.
And of course, he then went on to play many seasons with the club, formed that great front row trio with Roy Cicaldi and Henry Porter, and they became known famously as the Musketeers.
1938, Sydney University Club, which had played as an amateur club, just couldn't compete anymore, and they were eased out of the competition, giving it the shape it was to hold for the next decade or so.
cricket ground farewells a season's football as Eastern Suburbs and Canterbury Bankstown clash in the Rugby League final. Fast fighting football. Here they come, there they go. Norval to Hollingdale to Harry Pearce as East attack. Their powerful forwards rip through the defence in match-winning style. The Eastern forwards are grandly led by footballer policeman Ray Stair. What a call! Stops everything. Naughty, naughty. Oh, how could you? What's the name? Riley? What made you Riley? They told us you were such a shy boy, too. On with the game. With fast, clever play, the Eastern Suburbs machine hits top gear again. They'll break through. They're coming downfield. That's not all that's coming down either. Passing rush. Now for a brilliant movement. None to Brew, who misses. Watch for Big Joe Pearce. One-handed, he scoops up the ball, crashes through. To Callaghan, again to Brew. He flies through for a try that sets the seal on victory for Eastern Suburbs. Champions for 1940.
Some schools I went to only played soccer, e.g. Campsie, and when I got to Canterbury High, they played rugby union as a school representative sport, but they played class rugby league in terms of classrooms I'm talking about. But some chaps had suggested I go down to Campsie Ionas in the middle of 1941, around about June, that the football season had started. And I went down to Campsie Ionas that actually trained at Belmore Oval. And they said, look, we've got our team organised now, but there's a President's Cup trial on next week if you'd like to have a run there and give yourself a run at least. And eventually I was picked in after a couple of weeks in the President's Cup side, and they found enough room for me in the Ionas side. You know, so indeed I was picked for President's Cup before I actually played juniors, but it was pretty close together.
I enlisted in the Army and went into Canterbury Race Course, where we did all our signal training and our other parts of the training. As a consequence, I became very, very fit, so that when the football season opened early in 1942, I was extremely fit, and I was chosen in the first grade. I played all the first grade trials, and then I was chosen in the first grade opening game against North Sydney at North Sydney Oval. My centre partner was Ron Bailey, and Ron subsequently captained Australia. He just returned from England, and he was quite the outstanding centre in Australia at the time. Now, Frank Hyde was playing for North Sydney, playing in the centres, and of course Frank Hyde on the North Sydney side were more concerned about Ron Bailey than they were about me, and Frank Hyde took off for Bailey, left me with a clear run. I passed it to Bailey, Bailey passed it to me, and I put it down beside the post. First grade game, first try.
They continued on and made semi-finals, and then again in 1942 they became premiers. Alan Brady was still captain. They'd bought this magnificent winger from Canberra way called Edgar Newham, and again, whenever any great bulldog teams are selected, Edgar Newham is still one of the wingers. He was a big, huge man, played for Australia. In the playoff for the minor premiership in 1942, he scored 5 tries against Balmain, and he scored 6 Canterbury, but he scored 5 of them. It's still a record. And they won the premiership. They played St George to beat that, and in the St George team was the great fast bowler Ray Lindwell. Things were a bit thin on the ground then as far as players were concerned by 42, and with quite a number of them away at the war. And I played a few first grade trial games because Henry Porter was stationed at Dubbo and couldn't get down, or didn't get leave for those games, and that gave me a bit of experience and enthusiasm, and I actually played 7 reserve grade games before I was posted. By that time I was on the Air Force Reserve waiting to go in, and I was posted unfortunately to Melbourne that year, the year they won the comp. Of course, after 35, Canterbury had some great coaches. They had Frank Burge, who regarded one of the best football brains. In 1936, he stayed for 1 year, but they paid him £125 for that year, making him probably the most expensive coach for any club. Very well paid, but that sort of started things rolling. And in 1938, when they won the premiership, they had the mighty Jimmy Craig, who had a remarkable football knowledge. And they moved on, Craig only stayed 1 or 2 years as well, but they had laid a foundation for Canterbury. Of course, in 1942, the amazing thing there during the war is that there was the feeling that the game wouldn't be played in that year, and it was probably the only year that there was some doubt about rugby league actually being played. And Canterbury decided not to hire a coach. They didn't want a coach. But Jerry Bryan, who had been a coach in an earlier year, offered just to help out. So instead of calling him coach, they called him manager. And so Canterbury went on to win the premiership in 1942, minus a coach.
Well, during the war years, and I counted from 1941, when I started following the Berries. The Berries was their nickname out of Canterbury. And our logo in the New South Wales football program, because we were the newest club, was a little baby in a crib with one curl on its head, because we were the sort of the junior team in the competition. A big departure from the bulldog model or image today. And I commenced going there because my eldest brother Jack, the eldest in the family, commenced playing third grade with Canterbury. He played in 1941. Then in 1942 he was graded in the first grade as a centre three-quarter with Ron Bailey. So we had a great personal interest in the game, although my father had been a foundation member right back from 1935 of the football club. So and Jack played that 1942 season, but then got sent off like so many young men aged 20 or 21 years of age off to New Guinea. He didn't come back till 1945, ridden with malaria, so his career was virtually over. And so we had a hybrid team in those days. And because of the wartime, there was rationing, there was food rationing, there was clothing rationing. Getting jumpers was difficult, and I remember one season we played in maroon with a blue V. Dyeing was a very poor quality, and on wet days, Canterbury players would all look like Red Indians because the dye had run down their arms and legs and on their faces. And so we weren't always blue and white. During the war years, we used whatever colour was available, and I can only recall the maroon with the blue V. Remembering, of course, that in that time it was residential qualifications, and you had to live in the geographic area allocated to your club. The club had boundaries, and if you lived outside that area, you could not legally play for the team. I live at 44, 46 Chalmers Street, Belmore. In the old days, my grandmother lived at number 46, and she must have lived with 50 footballers, because most of the team who lived outside the area put their address at 46 Chalmers Street, Belmore, and we'd get my grandmother was trained to give all the mail for the footballers to my father so that he could take it down to training.
One of the funniest things that I can remember being on the field was when Henry Porter was made captain. I can't remember the circumstances, but Henry was given the job of being captain. And when we were playing Balmain, we were cautioned before we went on the field, no penalties in your own half, because Joe Jorgensen will kick a goal. Jorgensen, who played for Balmain, was the best goal kicker around about at that time. We weren't on the field more than about 5 minutes, and Tom McMahon penalty to Balmain. What for? Burns has got his feet up in the scrum. A few minutes later, another penalty to Balmain. What's wrong? Burns swung a punch at somebody. A few minutes later, another penalty. What's wrong, says Porter to McMahon. It's Burns again offended. Where's Burns? And Porter was going to after Burns, and McMahon said afterwards, he said he's had plenty of occasions where he had to stop fights between opposing players, but that was the first time he had to stop a fight eventuating between two on the one side.
We grew up in Lakemba. I went to St Terry's Church in Lakemba and played Suwayo football, Catholic Youth Organisation football for Lakemba, which is a pretty strong side. The Suwayo competition was a very strong competition. I enjoyed every minute of that.
When was the first game of rugby league you saw?
I saw the grand final in 1943. Udam beat North Sydney by 35-7. I was a great game of football. I was on the hill, thousands of people, 65,000 people up on the hill. I just loved the atmosphere to be on the hill. I was only, 11 or 12 then. It was the most popular game in the state. Yeah, it was good football.
The Australian 6th Division established a front down at Weewack. I went into Weewack with the 6th Division with a line crew, signals line crew, where the Japs were camped back in the hills where they had a number of large guns, and from where they used to send raiding parties down along the beach. But each afternoon they used to shell along the beach. It was quite worrying as to where the shells were going to land, because I don't think the Japs had any particular target in mind, but so long as they threatened us and frightened the daylights out of us, I think they were quite happy. When I was back in Sydney, I wasn't the healthiest of persons. I had quite a lot of malaria for a time. My stone, I went into the army at about 12.5 stone, came out at about 10.5, and also I think I must have been a bit of a mental wreck, because I was treated for nerves of the stomach and nerves of something else, but I think I've recovered to a certain degree now.
We did an OTU at Prince Edward Island in Canada, and further conversion course from Hudson's, which we were on then, to Halifax aircraft, and subsequently we were at St David's in Wales and Stornoway in Scotland doing anti-shipping strikes. We did a short support term at Bay of Biscay on supporting the landings, and after D-Day, and then up to Stornoway and trying to block off transfers from the Baltic down to the site of the war proper.
I got hurt in 43, I think it was 44 when I got home, 44. I came home, if you can remember the year, I came home on the hospital ship, the Centaur, the one they sank. Well, I came home on her, the only trip she ever made. And luckily, we got off before they sank it. We got off at Brisbane. We were supposed to come to Sydney, and I will call it fond memories of that, because I had the first major operation, gangrene out in the leg, on the ship the day before we berthed it. We arrived at Brisbane, and the sister said to me, she said, "Well, you got something in your favour." You were the first one to have a major operation on this new table, on the new ship. As Sister was Sister Savage, she was the only survivor. After coming out of the war, coming out from the trouble out in the war, I was so damn used to being in hospital and knowing what people required in hospital. I used to know what they'd want, what would make them happy. So I said, I'll do the welfare job. And just for that reason, because I had so much self-experience in it, I just kept it on with the football and the league club.
I was brought up in a suburb called Earlwood, which was adjacent to Belmore, and all we ever did is play cricket and football, and still have great memories of riding a bike and barefooted and scaling the fence at Belmore to watch Eddie Burns play football. Well, I had a little bit of a start. My Uncle Joe played with Eddie, and at that stage I would have been 10 years of age when I first saw Eddie Burns and of course Kirkcaldy and Porter play. And I certainly have great memories of my uncle playing on the wing, and things like Roy McCarter, who was a diminutive halfback, very cheeky, would jump up in the air to punch a front rower's face or jaw, and of the backs, because I always thought I'd be a back, and I remember blokes like Ron Bailey and Jack Bonnyman, and I remember the Johnson brothers.
Well, you certainly couldn't break into the front row in those days because of their well-established operation, and only age stopped them. And finally, I made it up into the front row from the second row, but it was enjoyable playing second row because you got the feast of the ball. And
Kenny Challen, he got his name the Tank because 3 or 4 blokes in his back, he just carry him over the line, no trouble, and he's as strong as the ball still is.
Well, the apprenticeship for rugby league in Sydney was to make the President's Cup. That was the junior representative football, and if you made that, you were a fair chance. And I happened to be captain of the President's Cup, and as a captain, I suppose I had a better chance. But anyhow, I was pulled up from President's Cup into grade the year I played. I didn't have to wait till the following year. And in that time, we finished up with 4 very, very good first graders in Ronnie Willie, who was a kangaroo, Ray Preston, who still holds the record for the most number of tries in Sydney football right from this day. 33 tries in a season. I think I mentioned Neville Charlton, did I? Neville Charlton played for the state, so I think it's fair to say that 4 of us became pretty fair footballers from that President's Cup side.
Ross McKinnon was a people person, and I think his experience in the army, he was a captain in the army, and while he wasn't authoritarian as such, he was understood blokes, and he could get the most out of you. I can recall on one occasion we were playing St George, and he sat down next to me in the dressing room, and I was rather chuffed about it, that he said, I never ask anybody to do anything, we're a team. But he said, I'm going to give you a job today. He said, there's a bloke on this other side, and his name's Narvo, Herb Narvo, and he plays for St George. It was just because we were playing St George. And he said, I don't care if he goes up the goal post today, I want you to stick to him like a limpet and stop him running, because he was running forward. And I did the job, I thought, efficiently. So much so that half time he said, you've got him on the back foot. He said, yeah, because he'd played with him in the state sides. And he said, who's this blue-headed so-and-so you've got on me? Well, it took me about 5 years to wake up that Herb Narvo wouldn't have said that to McKinnon anyway, and but it made me go bigger in the second half at that time.
There was further change with the addition of teams from growing areas, from Manly and Parramatta, who were brought in to add to the competition in 1947.
46, 47 were great years. We went to the finals on both occasions. Through the next few years, we had the retirement of Porter and Kirkcaldy. Burnsy went off in 50, after 50. It might have been 51, I'm not sure about that, but I thought those holes and long-established players that we'd had up to that period, and the rebuilding of other sides all around us, money was not readily available. I'm talking about sponsorships and things like that, or rich backers or anything like that. So, therefore, players were leaving the club to coach in the country where there was a bit of money to be made. Good players left, and we had a bit of trouble rebuilding after. It might sound a lot, but Kirkcaldy and Henry Porter were missed, and McCarter had only left the year before in 45. So those years were a matter of rebuilding.
We lived in Elwood all our life, all the family, and they're pretty well known in Undercliff as well. But to start playing football in the Canterbury area, it was with the Belmore Juniors. This was in 1945. We played two seasons of C grade, then 2 seasons of B grade, and then came to Canterbury in 1948. Joe Gartner was the coach of the reserve grade team, and they wanted some players to make up the reserve grade team for about the last 3 games. Our third grade were playing in semi-finals, and rather than break that team up, they decided to put a few of the reserves into the reserve grade team. So that's how I started with Canterbury.
I was born on the 26th of December 1931 in Wingham, New South Wales, which is on the Manning River, and my parents lived on the river in a farm. I had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and when we moved from Taree or Wingham to Port Kembla during the war, and then when the war finished we moved to Lakemba, and we lived in Wiley Park, and our dad made us all learn a trade. I was a printing compositor. I played for the Lakemba C grade. There was only 3 grades in those days. A grade was over age, 21 was B grade, and C grade 18. And I played C grade when I was 14. And I played with Lakemba for 4 years. And then I got called up to Canterbury in 1950.
I was born in 1937 at Chapel Street, Marrickville, 4 doors from the Henson Park Hotel. My father and 4 brothers rather, there was 5 boys in the family, all lived in Marrickville, Joe being my uncle. Dad, when he was in the services, was at Tobruk. Before going there, he played a bit of junior rugby league, but he was actually a professional boxer, and he pursued that career for some time. My uncle Joe Gardner, was also quite a handy man with the gloves, winning titles in the services. But then he pursued his career in rugby league. He was a teammate there of my now deceased father-in-law, Frank Sponberg, who won a competition with Western Suburbs in 1934, but being a Canterbury junior, then played with Canterbury from 1935 to about 1943. My early schooling was at Earlwood Primary School, where the Prime Minister, John Howard, was 2 years below me. From primary school, I then progressed to Sydney Technical High School at Paddington, which was also the school of Charles Kingsford Smith, Reg Gasnier, Bob Outerside, and many other sportsmen. The only club I wanted to follow and ever wanted to play for was Canterbury Bankstown. I'd catch the bus from Earlwood to Belmore, walk down to Belmore Oval and watch my heroes in action, and those players at that time were people like Ron Bailey, Bruce Hopkins, who was the first Canterbury Bankstown Kangaroo in 1948, Eddie Burns, Henry Porter, Roy Cicaldi, Len Holmes, many of those. I vividly remember going to the sports ground in 1947 to see Balmain and Canterbury in the grand final. That was won by Balmain 13 points to 9, and if memory serves me correct, Joe Jorgensen played his only game for Balmain that year and scored all 13 points, a try and 5 goals. Balmain brought him from, I think, Cootamundra, and I'm fairly certain that that was his only game. Torchy Hassan scored all the points for Canterbury, a try and 3 goals. And that was a vivid memory.
1951 was when I first played first grade, and the thing about that was that Jimmy Collins was my halfback, and I was very pleased with him. He was one bloke that really helped me along. There were specialist positions, and you were expected to be there all the time. As far as the difference between 5'8" centres, wings and things like that, they're all expected to do a certain amount of work. But this brings to mind Vic Hay once, who he came out after selecting the team, and he'd switched both centres. I was playing centre in those days, and the wingers, he'd just switched them. I think the 2 wingers came into the centre and the 2 centres went out to the wing. And he said, we weren't going too well at the time. And he said, well, they're there would have been more positional changes, you know, had we had the players available to fit them in.
Well, I would have loved to think I could play a bit like Ron Bailey. Ron Bailey captained Australia from Canterbury Bankstown. He was the type of centre that ran through a hole, and I thought that I could run through a hole. There were other great centres who were obviously much better footballers than me, but I could not mould my style on them. There was footballers like Sis Cooper who were very, very strong and fast, but totally different footballers. Yes, I'd like to think that I tried hard to mould my game on Ron Bailey's. He was my hero, and I was a centre, so yeah, Ron Bailey.
I started off as a second row. Believe it or not, I was about 10 stone 7 when I first went to Canterbury in 1950, and I did a fair bit of wrestling in those days, and I built up. But the first coach I had in first grade was Jackie Hampstead. That's his grandson, the referee these days. Jack was a fine man. He was a great Balmain stalwart, but he coached us. He was a wonderful coach. And then we had Vic Hay, who was a well-known international 5'8", had a lot of football in England. In 1950, I played 14 third-grade games and 4 reserve-grade games and got £13. I bought my first suit for that. And and that was the divvy in those days. In 1954, I played every game in first grade and got £94 for the season. Canterbury had a great spirit. That was the great thing about Canterbury in those days. The players were all mates. Like, we never had a great deal of success on the field.
I only had 2 years, 54 and 55.
And what position did you
Fullback.
play? Right. And could you tell us about those 2 years?
Yeah, they were interesting years because I'd just come out of the Catholic Youth Organisation into the professional, and it was quite a big jump to make. Good coaching, good club, good friendly club, which I always remember as a friendly club. So I modelled Canterbury on the same thing. Be a friendly family club. It was a lot of fun to play for them.
It was and pushed very heavily by the French from as late as the 1930s was the thought that, as soccer had, Australia Rugby League should have a World Cup, a World Series type competition. And in 1954, the first of those was played to set down a tradition for some very notable tournaments that followed.
Following 1953, 1954 and 5, we just didn't have the players available to us. I think this was an era where other teams were probably getting better players or promoting them through their juniors, and we just couldn't keep pace with them, I think. We tried numerous things, coaching, in these years, but you know, we were always finishing about 7th or 8th.
I decided to go to the country as a player coach for a couple of years in an effort to build a house. I just got married. And in 1954, I played against England at Canberra, and in 1955, I played against France at Lismore, both as a representative of country districts. So for 4 years, I was away, and I came back and played my last 3 years with Canterbury, and played a fair bit of first grade in those last 3 years. Yeah.
My first junior rugby league was with Belmore Juniors in the Canterbury district. My 4 brothers and cousin had all played before me, before they progressed to the grade ranks. In 1955, I represented the club in President's Cup, and then 1956, I had my first season in grade. The first grade coach at the time was the legendary Vic Hay. Whilst I didn't have a lot to do with Vic that year, I vividly remember after a trial in 3rd grade at Henson Park, he walked over to me and gave me some advice on sidestepping, suggesting that I was stepping inside and might not have a long life if I continued to do that, because I'd be just running into the cover defence, and not being very big, I'd probably get smashed. I certainly took his advice and changed my style with the help of my eldest brother Jim, who taught me how to sidestep outside the opposition in our backyard at Earlwood, using clothes prop as the opposition. I actually played centre most of all. I came up as a 5'8", but I played majority of years as a centre.
I joined the police in 1957, and I was stationed at Campsie first because Eddie Burns had a lot of pull with the police, and because I was playing for Canterbury, I got stationed at Campsie, and during the football season I'd be working on the summonses and warrants, which was a daytime job. Freddie Anderson used to work in the court, he was the hooker, and Kenny Rollins used to work in the box up at Belmore. He was on the motorbike, no night work, and we all played for Canterbury.
Ray Gartner was Joe Gartner's son. If I might say so, probably the best of the Gartners. Ray should certainly have represented, but he and we played in an era where St George and South Sydney dominated. Ray won Player of the Year contests, won a motor car. Very quick, very strong, and very well taught by his father.
The first object I had as a secretary was to try and find extra funds and some players. We had Colin Geelan come into the club in those days. He was a great 5'8". We had a basis of a good side. We had Brian Davies come into the side. But one of the main objects was to get a leagues club, because this appeared to me to be, not only to me, but to the committee in general, they'd been batting around for a couple of years on possible sites and discussions on committee about the wherewithal and how do we get one of these clubs. And you've got to remember that only a couple of years, or around about the next year, I think the poker machine licences came into vogue, and clubs like, I can remember two in mind, Wollongong, under Dudley Locke, and who was the Country League secretary, and St George Leagues Club were already functioning, and it seemed to be a bit of an answer. But prior to this, many clubs were only supported by their, particularly in the country, but in Sydney too, by the local hotel, which was a bit of a rallying ground for the rugby league and club players and supporters. They had nowhere to meet socially, and that in itself was a boon to the clubs. The fact that you could have the people gather together after the game and during the week and talk about the football, and this was the secret of the popularity of the game as it has evolved.
It was either 58 or 59. I was probably had one of the, if not the proudest moments of my life, in that I played first grade with my cousin Ray and my eldest brother Jim. I think we played from memory 2 or 3 games together, and I just thought that was a wonderful time of my life. I think Jim then parted and took up a coaching job in the country, and Ray and I continued to play together.
There's a lot of history to it. We're here now in this club, which was the old Paragon No. 1 Picture Theatre. Paragon No. 1 was here at Belmore Station, and Paragon No. 2 was just up by the Belmore Boys High School at the top of Burwood Road. I don't think I ever went to Paragon No. 2. Always came to Paragon No. 1 and did all my courting at Paragon No. 1. And then when the cinemas lost favour, my brother Frank was in the Parliament. He was also in with Senator John Armstrong, who was with Greater Union Theatres or something like that. He had some connection. But what happened was that in 1956 we were in the old Salvation Army Citadel, little weatherboard cottage just in Collins Street, Belmore, and it was quite illegal. They sold beer and had poker machines there without any licence. I think they got raided once, and Eddie Burns got arrested.
We got our beer supplied by the RSL Club. We didn't have a licence. They gave us our keys. It's all good stuff.
And then they got Frank's help. Frank was the member for Lang, the federal member, and he got the federal government to sell them 2 Navy huts from Rose Bay, where there was an Air Force squadron, and with a lot of labour, a fellow named Charlie Bloom, Jack Tiller, and John O'Garland, all those fellows all worked with some artisans, had the shed brought out here to Cotton Street, demolished the old Salvation Army cottage, and put these 2 army huts together, same as Belmore Bowling Club did down on their side at Belmore Park. And though it was a very, very successful club, and then Senator Armstrong suggested to Frank he had a theatre for sale, and so they looked at this up here, and they bought the old Paragon No. 1 theatre, and then they renovated that and turned it into the Leagues Club, and it's grown a bit like Topsy, bits here and bits there, as you can see as you walk around the club, and it's become our headquarters, which has been highly successful, one of the most successful clubs in New South Wales.
That's what we won games. We had faith in our coach, and we had good officials and everything. And the friendship I got out of rugby league, no one had ever buy it from me, never.
I was born in Ipswich, Queensland in 1934. My mother and father lived at the head of the Brisbane River Valley in the lowlands or the foothills of the Great Dividing Range, and it was very cold there in wintertime. I always find it remarkable that having been in Sydney for many years, I've never been as cold as I used to be up in the Brisbane River Valley. But I grew up there. I had 2 brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. Growing up in the 30s, coming out of the Depression, which I knew nothing about, but I do have memories that food was fairly scarce. I can remember swaggies coming through, carrying the swag, looking for work, looking for a feed, looking for a few bob. I can recall those coming regularly through Linville. And also on the more colourful side, the gypsies came and went fairly regularly. And I can remember they had very colourful caravans, horse-drawn. And we always got a message to lock up many things, including the chooks. They regularly knocked off the chooks. And in Queensland, particularly in the mountains, it rained almost without stop during February. And February was the time, was mainly, particularly in the timber industry, it was very dangerous to work in the timber industry if anything was wet. Logs could shoot, leave their bark, skid, cause untold harm and damage. So the tradition was that the timber workers, who were quite a breed to themselves, would congregate in the one and only pub in Linville for the whole of February, and they'd just drink the whole time. And lots of fights, lots of frivolity, lots of singing, lots of dancing, all the rest of it, but lots of fights. But by and large, they always fought according to the Marquess of Queensberry rules. And I don't think I ever, as a boy, I don't think I ever saw anyone kick anyone while they were down. They certainly didn't use weapons, no glasses, no knives, guns. And it was all done, rather in a sportsmanlike manner. But one little facet of it all was the tradition that before anyone fought, these were the local boys, not so much the timber cutters, but the local boys, if they fought and there was a ring formed outside the hotel on the grass there, they always took their shirts off. Because if they went home with a torn or bloodied shirt to mum, they'd get a worse beating at home. I rode a horse to school, and which was a very enjoyable experience, particularly in the winter time. I rode bareback. And with the frost on the ground early in the early mornings, you'd get on your warm little pony and away you'd go. It was a great little experience. As far as sport went at Linville Public School, I did not play an organised game of football, either rugby league or rugby union. Mainly because, or probably totally because, there was no one there to make up the numbers. There weren't enough students there. As a matter of fact, to have a sort of a make-up touch sort of a game, we'd have to round up the girls to supplement the boys and make it worthwhile. When I went away to Nudgee College, I played rugby union there, but I think I always had this inbuilt love for rugby league, which was born and bred in Linville, and I don't quite know why. My family were not sports people. My father rode in camp drafts and things like that. And but my brothers didn't play sport, and for some reason or other, I picked this up. And I remember going away for holidays. It could have been this. I went for holidays regularly to Brisbane, and the people I stayed with were great Valley supporters in the Brisbane competition. I used to always support Valleys and go along with them. And probably that sort of caused me later on to want to play rugby league after I'd played rugby union. At Nudgee College, I was mainly involved in 3 sports. I was in boxing, rugby union, and I was good at shot put. And that sort of got me by. And then when I left Nudgee, I did national service training almost immediately. And at that time, the Korean War was on, and our instructors were NCOs, non-commissioned officers, and some commissioned officers who'd actually fought in Korea. But during that time, I came to appreciate, I was the boxing champion in the battalion heavyweight champion, and I came to appreciate some good conditioning, good training. We used to go on route marches and march up to Canungra, which was an assault training area. And during that time, I came to appreciate physical fitness, and I think it stood me in good stead in my football careers later on.
I was born in 1938 in Belmore. I grew up in that district and played for Lakemba. Yeah, Dad had to have 3 jobs because of the size of our family. We had 10 kids, and it was the only means of support. He used to grow a few vegetables and all that sort of thing, but in those days the families were big. During the war periods, Dad had, on the Sunday, football was on a Sunday in them days, he'd take myself and probably 1 or 2 of the other boys and go down to Belmore Oval and watch the local players play, like players like Eddie Burns and Holmes and Porter and Charlton and all them fellas. And I also had an uncle that played on the wing, and he started off in 2nd grade, and we used to go and watch him, and he had a few first grade games, approximately 50, I think.
I was born in Warwick on the 8th of January 1940. My father was a railway worker in pretty tough times in those early years, and my mother had 7 children, of which I'm the eldest. We moved from Warwick in 1948, and we went to a place called Glasshouse Mountains in South Queensland, and went to a lot of other small country towns prior to that, places like Woluga, Theebine, Mergen, and my schooling started at Woluga, where there was 17 children. I used to do ABC in the morning and algebra in the afternoons, and then I moved to a bigger centre then in Glasshouse Mountains, and I was starting to show some prowess in various sports, and a local butcher there thought that I would make a fairly good rugby league player. I was probably a big kid for my age, and they suggested I should go to Nambour, where it was a bigger centre and a lot more sporting opportunities. And from there I was given the opportunity to participate in the trials of the 7 Stone 7 Queensland schoolboys, and lucky enough to make that team. And we visited Sydney to play the annual clash with the New South Welshmen, and we played a curtain raiser in front of before the Australia versus the Kiwis test. And during that tour, as a warm-up game, we also went to Wollongong to play this Southern Division, and I was billeted out with a fellow called Peter Diamond, who's become a very famous rugby league player, and his family. He had a brother, Bob, who represented Australia and went on the 1948 Kangaroo Tour. So also in the team opposite us was Reg Gasnier, and unfortunately we lost the series 3-0, not with any great blowout scores, but they were too good for us on that occasion. We then moved out to, with my father's work, to Dalby, where I also took up another sport, or I was playing cricket at Nambour before I went to Dalby, and the state cricket trials were held in Brisbane, and I made the Queensland schoolboys team to go to Adelaide, and we won that carnival. I was a wicketkeeper batsman and had a reasonable amount of success on that trip. I played cricket quite a bit after that as well, but rugby league became my main interest, and I think due to my father with his genes and my mother being a fairly competent athlete as well, gives me fairly good ball skills and speed, so I was rather fortunate.
I was born in 1941 at Tumbarumba. I come from a family of three. I've got a brother, Colin. Colin went on to play with Canterbury Bankstown too as a hooker. I had another sister, Coral. My father, Charles, he worked in the forestry most of his life. Mum stopped at home and looked after us. I went to the local primary school at Tumbarumba, learned to play football at a young age. We were often, our main thrill was going to the Junee Carnival, which was a big thing in the Riverina in those days. And you've got to remember in those days when I was going to school, we never had TV. It was just radio, and I used to often listen to Clive Churchill in South Sydney, and I can still hear Clive Churchill leaking up with Ian Moyer, and he was one of my idols, and I was fortunate enough later to be coached by him, and what a great player he was, and what a great fellow.
I was born in Newcastle in 1942. I went to a school in Merriweather called the St Joseph's. My football days really started when I was a ball boy for Newcastle, South Newcastle. Dad worked at the BHP. He was open cut foreman there for about 40 years, I believe. He played first grade with South Newcastle. That's the club that I started with. And he actually represented Newcastle, well, Country Week in about 1946, I think it was. My mother was exactly that. She was a mother and she looked after the family, myself, my sister Judith, who was a couple of years older than I. Judith went to the school at the Junction as well. Dad, as I said before, was the breadwinner working at the BHP. My football days started, I suppose, when I was associated with South Newcastle as a ball boy when I was about 8 years old. I played under 12s and juniors, as most kids do these days. From there, I graduated to playing under 10s and under 12s with South Newcastle. And after that, I went from St Joseph's to Hamilton Morris Brothers. Didn't make any higher an impression to play over there other than second grade in rugby league, but that's where I was playing 5'8". Quite a good school for rugby league players. I think Clive Churchill was one of the players in the earlier years. From there, after leaving school in the intermediate, I went to Souths and played under 16s, under 18s, and from there I went on to play first grade.
I was born at Portland in New South Wales, a little country town near Lithgow in 1943. And then we lived at a place called Caperty. It's a little bush town that only had the one school from first class to sixth class. My father was a miner. He worked in the mines, and the mine closed, and when I was about 7 or 8 years of age, we moved to Sydney. We moved to Mortdale at about 1951, and I went to school at St Declan's, primary school, and then I graduated to Morris Brothers Cogra for 12 months, and then Morris Brothers Penshurst, where I started my football career. I was playing lock forward for them, and I tried to get down to 7 stone 7 because they had an open weight and a 7-7, and I couldn't get down to 7 stone 7, so I had to play in the open weight, and consequently I was the halfback. But generally I played lock forward or on the wing.
I was doing largely heavy work. I was working on roads. I was doing carting base, road base. I was involved in actual physical work and driving, dozers and using drills and jackhammers and what have you, all that sort of stuff.
I was born at Camperdown in Sydney in 1945 at the Camperdown Hospital. I have 8 brothers, 4 younger than myself and 4 older than myself, and the majority of us played rugby league. My father, Arthur Raper, was a very, very hard-working man. He had 3 jobs at the time to support 6 children then, and he was a loving and caring father, whereas Mum would have had to stay at home and look after the children. Dad had no spare time at all. Because of his involvement in bringing the monies in, to care for the family. So he was active all the time working, and we didn't see as much of him as what we would have liked to. From Camperdown, we moved to a housing settlement in Warwick Farm, waiting to be allocated a house, a housing commission house for Mum and the 6 boys. We moved from Warwick Farm to Revesby, where we were allocated that house, and 2-bedroom house with 6 boys, double bunks in two of the rooms. And in a period of 2 years, my mother had another baby. To be living in that area, you had to be a little bit tough, and it was a situation where there were a lot of tough people there too. We lived in Iluka Street. At the time, there was a family across the road called the Bushby, so to be king of the streets, we challenged them to a game of football up at Amore Park, which was one of the local parks in Revesby, full of gravel, not very much grass up there at all. Ray Bushby made this break down the sideline there, and Johnny, being as fearless as what he was, come along and dived parallel to the ground and drove him along the turf. Came up Ray with a large gravel rash, blood everywhere, and after that game, Ray wasn't very impressed at all, but he declared us king of Iluka Street. We lived behind a tennis court at Revesby, and we found a lot of tennis balls. We played with the tennis balls a lot because it gave us a lot in ball skills, anticipation, throwing the ball, kicking the ball, and to realise how important the ball was.
At Nudgee College, I had represented in the combined GPS side for the whole of Queensland, all the Queensland GPS schools. So when I left, I was recruited for Brothers Club, which was traditionally compiled of ex-Nudgee boys and similar boys, but, not exclusively. And I was recruited by the great lay, there's the Mr. Chips of Nudgee called Johnny Ross, who was the lay teacher there for 30-odd years or more. And so I played with Brothers, and from Brothers I played for Queensland. And then I represented Australia in the Wallabies in 1957-58. Was probably the last of the Grand Slam tours, which only went every 10 years in those days. And we went over by boat. It took almost 2 months to get there. Anyway, we had a leisurely stroll around the world, went through the Suez Canal, which was recently had been the site of the Suez War. And I remember it was still under martial law, both Aden and Suez. And I think it was Suez, it would have been Suez, yeah, where we were out there one night and walking around very quietly, all the soldiers armed and so on. And next one, this horse-drawn cab came along, handsome cab, I suppose you'd call him. And sitting up on the top was what you'd expect, a big black fellow with a red fez on. Next minute he said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" It was Nick Shahady. He was being taken around for a tour of Suez by the Rells from Lebanon. Toured England and Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the home counties. France, I played my first test for Australia for the lock forward at Twickenham on that occasion. I could have won the Twickenham test. I broke free with about probably 20-25 minutes to go, clear, and who was in front of me but the one-armed referee. And being a gentleman, I was playing a gentleman's game. I stopped, got bowled over, and we didn't win the test at Twickenham.
John was playing for Newtown. In those days, it was wherever you lived, wherever your place of abode was, well, then you had to play in that particular area. John got around it because they had a very astute secretary over there at St George called Frank Facer, who decided that they wanted John to play with St George, irrespective of what they had to go through. So John actually had his address down for, even though that he did live at home at Revesby, he did have his address put down as Bexley, where Frank Facer lived.
After I was at the Dalby State School, my father was transferred to Kingaroy, where I also took up tennis and had reasonable skills at that, I thought, until I ran into a ginger-headed fellow called Rod Laver, who I played in a final in the South Burnett titles, and he beat me 6-love, 6-1. So my tennis career didn't go much beyond that, although I've played it socially ever since. But things developed from there. I finished schooling in year 10, and I went to Brisbane then as a police cadet, and I joined up with the Brisbane Eastern Suburbs Tigers and played all my junior football there through the age groups, 15, 16, 17s, 18s, and then when I was under 18s I was called up to first grade, and in 1959 I got my first rep jumper playing for Brisbane in the Bulimba Cup.
Well, after having been away almost 9 months with the Wallabies, 57-58 Wallabies, I returned to Brothers, and at that time the Maori side was visiting from New Zealand, obviously, 1958, and that Maori side was one of the toughest, most violent sides I think I've ever played in either code over a period of, getting on 20 years. And they'd cut a swathe through New South Wales, had ironed out a lot of players in New South Wales, came to Queensland, and this particular night we played a night game at the exhibition ground. We had a pea super right across the oval, right across the exhibition ground. Crowd couldn't see what was going on, the referee missed a lot of it, and we had this incredible brawl against the Maori side, which carried over to some extent the following Saturday in the test, and I was playing a lock forward for Australia in the test against the Maoris in 58. I came up against a guy called Hone Emery, Munga as he was known, Munga Emery, who jobbed our halfback and I jobbed him, and later on that year I went to New Zealand, and photos of me jobbing Munga Emery were sent before me everywhere I went in New Zealand.
As a kid I went to Belmore South School and then progressed up to the higher school in the public school, and then from there, from 6th grade, I went on to Belmore Technical College for a trade, and I played a little bit of football there, but I wasn't really keen on playing football. I played a couple of seasons, and then a mate said to me, he said, well, if you want to play, he said, come up and have a couple of games. He played with Lakemba. He said, come up and have a couple of games with us. And I went up there, and I had a couple of games in D grade as a lock forward, and then progressed up to C grade, and I was picked from C grade to go to grade, where I played hooker and lock, and it developed from there, you know, back in 1959.
Went to St Luke's School at Revesby from when I was 10 years of age. Attended the school for 3 or 4 years before I went to De La Salle Kingsgrove. Played in numerous games for De La Salle at Kingsgrove against a lot of other schools up there. Didn't mind fullback because I was only a small guy and could run. When I got in the forwards, it was a little bit tougher in the forwards because you were playing against bigger blokes than what I was. But I liked to hammer the big blokes, it was good. Then after playing at school, played for East Hills, which was a junior club affiliated with the Canterbury Bankstown Rugby League.
For some reason or other, I can't remember why, it was suggested to me I should take up boxing, which I did. There weren't a lot of heavyweights around, and I think during the whole of the time I fought as a heavyweight in Queensland, which I did for the following 2 years, I only probably fought 12, 13 times. And but I ended up beating Don Green in the Queensland title, and that brought us into 1959, and the British Lions were coming in 59, and I was very keen to play against the British Lions. And at that stage I'd been the test lock since Twickenham in 1957, through the Maoris and through the All Black tour, and I would have expected that I would have been at least thought of initially as the test lock for 1959 against the Lions, British Lions, which incidentally included Tony O'Reilly of media fame, who was a great winger actually, and very fast, very strong, with a big swerve. And anyway, I had a friend who was the Queensland fullback, and we used to flat together in Brisbane, called Vince Hogan. And Vince had mates down at the Galloping Greens at Randwick, and each year used to go down do their pre-season training. And he came back at the end of his pre-season training in '59, and he said, "You're not going to be the test lock this year." I said, "Well, they haven't started to flex sides yet, have they?" He said, "Well, they have at Randwick, and you're out." He said, "Bobby Outerside, who was a good lock and had been a lock years before in the '53 African tour. They said they're resurrecting Bobby Outerside, bringing him back, and that's exactly what happened." I had received emissaries via or from St George about going to play with St George in rugby league, Sydney, and but I hadn't actually seen anyone. And we were playing Toowoomba one day. Brisbane was playing Toowoomba in rugby union, and during the game we were leading, as we usually did. We were leading by 20, 30 points. And the word came out, "They're here." It wasn't easy to know who they were talking about. The St George guys had arrived in their hats and blazers. There was Frank Facer, the secretary, and I forget who, another one or two. "They're here, do something." I'd been having a bit of a loaf against Toowoomba. So I looked around and the ruck was forming, and who's standing there with the ball? None other than Evan Whitten of subsequent media fame. Written a lot of books on white-collar crime and what have you. And he was a big halfback. He's a very big halfback, and he was standing up and wasn't in ruck and had the ball. So I thought, well, Evan, I'm sorry, but I've got to impress these St George guys. So I flattened Evan, but he's forgiven me subsequently. So I eventually I spoke to St George. They came and saw me, and we sat down, and there was a bit of negotiations going on, and that was where it stood at the time. So we got into the papers, and a week or so later, Joe French, who was the then president of the Australian Rugby Union and had been a past Brothers coach, player, president probably, yeah, president, and we're at a function somewhere, and as these things often do, in the toilet. I'm at the toilet, and in he comes, and he said, "You Wallabies," he said, "you use your club, you tour the world, and then you go and play rugby league." I said, "Well, Joe, what I'll do," I said, "I want to play rugby league. I'll be honest with you, I do, but I said, I'll delay it a year, and I'll win a premiership for Brothers before I go." And I duly was lucky enough. I captained Brothers to a premiership win in 1959 before going to St George.
I finished my schooling at Tumbarumba. I was fortunate enough at that stage to be playing senior football, probably 17 or 18. Donnie Ferner was our coach. He came down from Queensland, and Donnie was a great coach, probably one of the best coaches I had, and he was not only a great coach but a great player and a great man too with it. But he coached me. He had me playing fullback at one stage, and I probably was the worst fullback Tumbarumba ever had. But he said you'll learn a lot from it, and you'll end up in the forwards. Well, I ended up going into lock forward, and I played there.
Back when I first started to play, there was my coach was Eddie Burns when I first came to the club, and he was, as you know, him and Henry Porter were one of the best scrummagers, and in that area when they did play in those days, possession was everything. So we always had to have a good hooker, and Freddie Anderson was one of the best hookers. They used to call him the Prince of Hookers. And just watching Fred at the time when I was playing lock, I learned a lot just watching him. And I later on progressed from there to hooker, and where I played out the rest of my career. Eddie was quite a good coach but back in that period we had new players coming to the club, and he had a knack of talking to players and getting the best out of them. And back in '59, when we were on the bottom of the table, and he took us right through into the semi-finals and finals in the following year.
We made the playoff. There was, I think it was a 4 or 5-way tie for third and fourth positions, and our first playoff was against Balmain at the sports ground. We won that game. We played Easts, and I think that was a semi-final, and they eliminated Canterbury from the semi-finals in 1960.
I think we all have idols when we're young blokes, and mine was a fantastic player, by the name of Brian Carlson. He came from Newcastle. He played with Norths in Newcastle. He was a junior from there. And I think he then went off when he got selected to play representative football, and he played for quite a number of other clubs, I think, including one or two in Queensland. But what I really admired about him was his effortlessness to be able to sort of do whatever he wanted to do. He was more like, he would have been a great ballet dancer. He had a lot of grace and a lot of style about him when he played, and that really attracted me to watching him.
I moved out of the area when I was married, and then I bought the Belmore News Agency right down the corner from the League Club.
In 1961, I made the state team on 3 occasions, and then during the period that year I was transferred in the police force to Townsville, and I was fortunate to be signed on as a player coach for the Centrals club up there, which was sponsored mainly by one of the great icons of rugby league in North Queensland, Laurie Raleigh. He was known as Laurie Bluey Raleigh, and run the Criterion Hotel on the Strand, which was a famous waterhole. And whilst I was in Townsville, I was selected to play for Australia in the first test against probably the best touring team that ever come to Australia in 1962, which included people like Eric Ashton and Billy Boston and Alex Murphy. And unfortunately we were beaten by a considerable score, and 8 of us were dropped from that test match. And as a result of that, I didn't make the next 2 tests. But in 1963, I was given a reprieve, and I played against the Kiwis in 63. Just going back a little, against Great Britain, I played them on one Saturday at the Sydney Cricket Ground. I played them the next Saturday at Lang Park, and the following Sunday at the Sports Reserve in Townsville. So I was quite sick of seeing that particular team.
Mostly I played 5'8" when I was a young fella. In fact, I did exclusively till I finished playing under 18s with South. And then I decided that things were a little bit hot up in the 5'8" position, and I had more room to move back at the back of the attack. So I took the option to play fullback from the days when I started playing first grade with South Newcastle. And that was when Nat Silcock came across from England to coach us. Not that he had anything to do with me playing fullback, but he was a good coach, Nat, and he had quite a reputation. So we made the grand final in his second year of coaching. It was my last year in Newcastle, 1962, when we were beaten by North in the grand final. And so it was a big year. Country seconds that year as well. So then it was off to Sydney and to Canterbury Bankstown.
After I left school, I travelled with my uncle, who was a salesman. He used to open up stores and shops in various country towns, and I did that for probably 18 months. When I returned from travelling, a couple of mates picked me up. They were going to the St George President's Cup trials, and I accompanied them there, and I hadn't had a game for probably 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, but I was playing on the wing. I was fortunate enough to score a try, and you know, they remember the person who scored the try. You come back next week, and my mates got cold early, and I was fortunate enough to make the President's Cup side with St George, and we got knocked out the first game, but we got beat 18-16 against Manly, and I'd scored 3 tries, and of course took the eye of a couple of selectors with St George, and consequently I was promoted to third grade, and then all the rest in reserve grade of that year. And consequently in 1962 and 63, I played probably half of them in first grade, and playing with some great players because they were absolutely fabulous side then.
Canterbury Bankstown had a scout, or had a couple of scouts at that England versus Newcastle match, and they thought that I would do all right with them in Canterbury, and so they made me an offer, which in those days had to be run past my own club, of course, and there was a transfer fee question in those days. Well, the South Newcastle team didn't want to lose me, and they put quite a transfer fee on me, and Canterbury Bankstown were a little bit hesitant to pay that transfer fee. I forget the exact amount now. But anyhow, as in the end, face up with in the big time. My game fee, my season fee, to come back to allow Canterbury to be able to afford me. So yeah, in the end, I suppose I did subsidise my own departure to Sydney.
I had an approach from Canterbury. Jack Anderson was the fellow that approached me. Him and his brother Teddy played with Canterbury years ago, and a lovely bloke, Jack. But I did get an offer from Western Suburbs the year before, and I thought I was too young and I wouldn't make it, so I put that off, and eventually I ended up in Canterbury, and Ron Ibbotson and Freddie Dunn and Jimmy Collins come up and signed me up at Wagga.
In 1963, when I came to Canterbury, the first year into the big smoke, Mum was pretty anxious about me leaving Newcastle. Dad came down to see quite a few of the games early in the piece, some of the trials, etc. And I guess I did fairly well in the trials with playing at Newtown, playing at Henson Park. I think we played at Lidcombe Oval in the old days. And all in all, I did fairly well early in the piece. It was Canterbury's coach in those days was Clive Churchill, who, well, everybody told me what a great footballer he was. I never saw him play.
Clive's coaches in 1963 and 64. And we didn't have successful years those years because we were a young side and he didn't have much to work with. And I don't think it would have mattered who was coaches.
Canterbury didn't do very well in that first season of mine. Got plenty of tackling practice, so that sharpened me up a bit. And in fact, I just noticed from the Newcastle days that the pace was just that much quicker. A couple of times early in the season, I was diving at fellas trying to tackle them, and they weren't there when I got there. So I just had to pick up my pace. Peter Moore, a great Bulldogs identity, he was on the committee in those years, and he was a busy boy. He had 7 kids at that stage, with one more coming, I think, and so did one of the other committee men.
In 1963 was a good year for me and for the club. That's the year that's gone down in history because we had 11 consecutive wet weekends, and some smart person at the Sydney Cricket Ground decided to bring in some bull-eye soil about a month before the grand final to start preparing the wickets for the cricket season. That's how, you know, the sort of status that rugby league was given there at the time. And the cricket ground was just a quagmire. Between 25s there wasn't a blade of grass, and this is the famous scene of Artie Summons and Norm Provan walking off after the game covered in this black glue. It was a narrow victory for St George. We were leading, I think, by 1, 2, 3 points or something, and with only a couple of minutes to go, and I got the ball on our 25, and next minute, Cal O'Shea got me by one leg and Jack Gibson got me by the other, and they're both big, strong men. And they drove me head first into the ground. Now, normally I would have taken one hand off the ball and wrapped an arm around one or two of them and pulled him underneath me, but I couldn't do it because I knew that if I took one hand off that piece of soap, it would be lost, and West could have easily scored and won that grand final. So I hung on to it, and I got ploughed right into the bull-eye soil, and I had skin from my hairline, which was, I had a hairline those days. I had skin off from my hairline right down to my mouth in my passport photo taken shortly after that.
It was a Kangaroo year, and as I said, whilst we didn't do particularly well, I was lucky enough to be selected in the Kangaroos, and before getting the nod to go on the Kangaroos, I also won a coveted prize put on by the Sun, and that was the Ford Falcon. So whilst I didn't have a licence, my dad didn't have a licence, so Dad was the one who got the Ford Falcon because I was off on the Kangaroo trip. So when I came back from that, Dad was driving very well and I still didn't have a licence.
63, I played in the test against the Kiwis, and we won, and I kicked a couple of goals out of the mud and won the game. So I was pretty happy about that, but I was actually a replacement for a great player named Eddie Lumsden, who had torn a hamstring, and he was available for the next test, so I didn't go any further there, but I was expected to make the 1963 Kangaroos. I was selected by all the experts, and unfortunately they weren't the selectors, and the Kangaroo team was announced, and I didn't make the side. So as a result of that, I thought that I would make my own arrangements, and got myself a contract to go and play in Huddersfield in England for 3 years.
At the end of 1963, I'd had probably about 20 or more first-grade games, and I'd tasted first-grade football, I enjoyed first-grade football, I wanted to play first-grade football. It was impossible for me to do it at St George because they had so many good players. They had 2 international centres, 2 international wingers, and, you know, you just name it, and they just had them there. I knew I couldn't play there, I had to go elsewhere, and I was approached by 2 clubs, one Newtown and the other one was Canterbury Bankstown. I chose Canterbury Bankstown, probably geographical reasons, because it was a little bit closer where I lived at Mortdale, and the fact that they had a player who I admired was coaching them. That was the great Clive Churchill, and that's one of the reasons I went there. And there was quite a few players at St George that went at the same time as me, Georgie Talforth, Kevin Neal and Keefe Glenn. So, you know, I wasn't going to get homesick with those players there that I played with at St George.
Fred Anderson, he left the club, and that's when I took over the hooking role, and I made a fair fist of it. I started to hold my own, so they kept me there.
In '64, myself and my brother Murray played for East Hills. Canterbury approached both of us, but Murray had a minor dispute with the club and didn't want to play with the club, and I had a dispute with the club too because I wanted to go where Murray went to because we were pretty close brothers. Anyway, it was decided by Canterbury they wouldn't release me, but they released Murray to Western Suburbs, who he played first grade for, and I stayed with Canterbury.
My first year with Canterbury Bankstown, unfortunately, in the last trial we had before the start of the season, I unfortunately broke my leg, and I was out for about 10 weeks. The side didn't go so well in that year, and I think we probably only won 3 or 4 games. I'm not really sure, but it was a pretty ordinary performance from our side that year. 1965, Eddie Burns came back to the club, and he was very passionate rugby league and very passionate Berry supporter, as we were known in those days. He moved me, probably halfway through the season, he moved me from the wing to the centres, and he thought I was a much better attacking player from there than the wing, and I was more valuable to the side in the centres, and I adapted to that positional change, and virtually I relished it. And that year I was picked for City Seconds, which was, you know, what was my first representative match.
1965 was a year that the Kangaroos went to New Zealand. I was lucky enough to be selected in that one, so that was more good international experience against another nation.
Apart from 1960, when we made the semi-finals, the late 50s and early 60s was a struggling time for the club, and it wasn't until the club were able to sign quality players like Les Johns, John Grooves and George Talforth, even though they were second graders from St George. The quality of St George's depth was such that, as John and George both proved, they were first graders in any other club.
I had a very good year in 1965, and we played the grand final against South Sydney, who were the Young Turks on the way up, and all the media by and large were backing South to beat St George. St George had been around for too long. This was the 10th year. Before the game, there was none of this sort of thing that you see these days about backslapping and you know, motivations and all this sort of stuff. St George's dressing room was just deadly silent. You could cut the air with a knife. I can always remember Popper Clay sitting there and not, you know, just not saying a word. No one was saying anything. Everyone was deeply in thought. That's the way it happened. Norm Provan didn't say much. He was a man of few words. He led by example. And out we went, and we had, you know, I thought it was a wonderful, that was the huge crowd year, 78,000 plus. And we had a great win.
In '66, we played against Western Suburbs, a game that I can always recall. It was a little bit cheeky at the time, ran through, and got the ball and beat a legendary player called Noel Kelly. And 5 minutes later, he did the same anyway. He ran forward to me and was tackled. He went down and I put in a little sneaky one into the chin. And he looked up and he said to Ron Raper, he said, "Long way to go, young Raper, long way to go." And I just laughed at him and I said, "Come on, old man, up you get." 5 minutes later, the young Raper got the ball, charged through, and I thought I was through the gap, but it slowly closed and went down to the ground. And a couple of minutes later, or a minute later, I shook my head and said, "What happened?" Anyway, who was over me at the time, could have been even a little bit less than that, was a bloke called Noel Kelly. And he said, "I told you there was a long way to go on the game, Raper." After the game, he put his hand around me and was walking off the football field, and he said, "You give one, you got to take it."
In 1966, Roger Pearman became coach, and Roger was a Englishman, but he wasn't a real gifted footballer, but he was a brilliant conditioner, absolutely brilliant conditioner, and he was a pretty good coach. He got us fitter than we've ever been, and I think that that contributed to our somewhat success, you know, because a lot of the players that we had playing at the time, like Kevin Goldspink, Donny Hobson, Les Johns, myself, we started to mature. We started to become a lot better footballers. That particular year, I think I played state football, and I missed the first test, but I played in the last 2 tests against the Englishmen.
I was selected to play in the 3rd test against them in Sydney, which was a very controversial test. It was a fantastic game of football and there were some fine players in it, but the main points that I sort of remember, and are remembered for, I suppose, were a tackle on Alan Hardesty that I made. It was a very good tackle. Unfortunately, he didn't have the ball, and Cole Pearce ruled that had I not tackled him at that point in time, he would have scored a try, so Cole awarded a very controversial try. Another incident in the test was when Dick Thornett broke through. I merged up on the inside of him, took a pass off Dick, and then I threw not such a good pass to Kenny Irvine. It hit his shoulder, went up in the air. He stopped, came back, got the ball, and went on to score the try, which Tommy Bishop very savagely contested. Cole Pearce gave us the benefit of the doubt then, and so a try was awarded. But that was a wonderful game of rugby league, and I often look back with fond memories of that one.
And I think Roger started to turn the club around. I give him a lot of credit for that. We didn't finish in the finals that year, but we were on the verge of it.
A scout from Canterbury approached me, and I wasn't interested in doing anything. But during the 1966 season, then the approaches kept coming mainly from a fellow called Kevin Keeble, who was a local businessman, come undertaker actually, and he had the ear of Canterbury, and I started to get interested towards the end of the 66 season. But I made it clear, I said, I'm not coming as a player. I said, it's captain, coach or nothing. I said, you know, that's it. I started to think a bit about Canterbury. I never thought much about them. They'd been in the doldrums for 20-odd years. I think they'd been wooden spooners or close to it for the previous years and all during that period. But when I started to think of it, I thought, well, there's certain qualities there and there's certain abilities there, and if I could get it all together, and if I could get them mentally hard and physically hard and fit, and give them big lashings of dedication, professionalism and discipline, I thought, you know, we could do something. So eventually I said, yeah, I'll take a captain coach job. So he went and approached the management committee. The management committee met, and he told me this later on, not at the time. One of the committee men said, look, if we bring Ryan in now, we've got harmony in the club. We didn't do that well this year. Well, we haven't done that well for 20 years, but there's harmony in the club. And Jimmy Collins, the president of the club, who's a former halfback for Canterbury, he said, Jimmy said, look, if we want harmony, we'll get the Beatles. But if we want to get into that grand final, we'll get Ryan.
I had a great 3 years in Huddersfield. I was made the captain for the last 2 seasons I was there. We didn't win anything of any significance, but it's a club with a great tradition and where I still have a lot of very close friends. Whilst I was in Huddersfield, in the summer I was able to put my cricket skills to good use, and I was employed as a professional in the Yorkshire League cricket, and during that time I made the Yorkshire Council team in the first of the Rothmans Cup, and Yorkshire made the final that year, and it was a great experience to play against blokes like Gary Sobers and Wes Hall, who were playing in the opposition in those times, I then decided that I had an opportunity to play cricket at a higher level in Nottingham at Trent Bridge, and I was offered a full 3-year contract to play county cricket. But unfortunately my wife was getting very homesick, and we heard that there were some opportunities in the Sydney competition which I hadn't played in, and I wrote to the then Secretary of Canterbury, Ron Ibbotson, who then offered me a contract to go to Canterbury, where Kevin Ryan had been appointed as the captain coach, and an Englishman, or a Welshman, he wouldn't like me calling him an Englishman, but Merv Hicks, the pale whale, was there, and fellas like Les Johns, Johnny Greaves, and Clive Gartner was a stalwart of the club at that time, and Kevin Goldspink, George Tailforth. It was a very formidable group of people they were assembling.
1967 can be viewed as an absolute watershed year in the game's history. A realisation that the game needed something different to give it impetus to carry it on to a new era. The decision was made to limit the number of tackles available, and the 4-tackle rule was brought in amidst great controversy and debate. And that same year, the league voted to bring in 2 more new areas in Penrith and Cronulla.
In 1967, Canterbury Bankstown acquired the services of Kevin Ryan from St George, transfer fee of $8,000.
Now, I knew Kevin when I played with St George. I played with Kevin. He's a very dogmatic person, but he was the bloke that undoubtedly brought professionalism into Canterbury Bankstown. There's no doubt about that.
I always remember when he first came there, he took all the players into the bottom dressing sheds, shut the door, and then went round every player individually and told them their faults and their good points, and and instilled a lot of faith in them, as far as their playing ability. A lot of players then didn't think they had the ability, but they just needed someone to bring it out in them, and Kevin certainly done that.
Also, I was very lucky. I came across Hughes. I forget his first. He's the father of the subsequent crop of Hughes boys, who are all great footballers for Canterbury. And Hughes was an engineer, and he made me a tackling machine, and he made me a scrum machine, and those were the bases of the coaching. Apart from physical fitness, I introduced an assault course. I got a lot of old army flak jackets. And I put lead weights according to the size of the player in those flak jackets, and they did weights under those. They did circuit training under those. They climbed assault ropes. They swung along ropes. They ended up like commandos.
I know he found a reserve at a place called Oatley Park that resembled sort of half a jungle, half mountain terrain, where we'd run this 8-kilometre course. And at the end of the course, he found these gigantic trees where he threw these 2-inch thick ropes over these branches, and you're required to climb the ropes and to touch the branch to ensure that you'd made the journey, and then you tried to come down the rope as quickly as you could and not take the skin off everything that you owned. And blokes like Merv Hicks, who were having all sorts of trouble, and I recall very vividly him coming down the rope at some speed on one occasion and taking all the flesh off the inside of his thighs where he was trying to hang onto the rope. With the rope climbing exercise, Kevin Ryan always wanted to demonstrate to us how easy it was, where he'd sit on the ground with his legs parallel to the ground, his hands in front of his chest, and he would climb this rope, and on the way up the rope he'd be telling us gorilla jokes and get to the top and give the branch a smash that would knock half the leaves off the tree. So that was the tutoring there, and no one ever got to the stage where they could replicate what Kevin was doing with the climbing of ropes.
Kevin Candos Ryan. Candos, well, I was born at Portland, and Candos is not far from there, and at Candos there's a cement works there, and hence the name Candos, because he was just cement. He's so tough. He's so tough, so hard.
Now, I had brought from St George the straight line defence, which they in turn had brought via Harry Bath and Killarney from England. But with the four-tackle rule, I thought we had to rationalise a little bit here and there. And one of the things I brought in was left-right, because of the speeding up of the game, as it were, with only 4 chances to handle the football before you kicked. I thought it was important that people be put in their position rather than roaming as we had roamed with St George. So I introduced left and right defence. It wasn't rigid. It was rigid for the front rowers, it was rigid for the second rowers, and it was rigid for the centres. But they were the linchpins on which the formation was built, those 6 players. Those 6 players at any given time were always in their position, left or right, those 6 players. The lock, the halfback, the 5'8", they could roam, they could rove. And we introduced this system of defence, which was, as I say, the St George England defence adapted to four-tackle football. And it turned out to be completely successful. We had the best defensive record in the competition in 1967. We didn't score a lot of tries, but no one, or very few, scored against us. Because when we ran our 3 tackles on the 4th, we kicked, and we put our ring of steel, we called it. We had set players, and some of them would have been those 6 players I've mentioned, who went up and formed this ring around the fullback usually, or whoever winger it could have been, taking the ball. And it gave us 3 chances. It gave us the chance of a fumble, which put us onside. It gave us the chance of a loss of possession by that person, and it gave us the chance of at least a scrum, where we were pretty dominant. So it was a very powerful part of our game.
And then we started playing football the Kevin Ryan way. And the Kevin Ryan way probably suited my style in a way, in as much as he wanted people to be taken up high. Certainly didn't suit some of our forwards' styles, because they were used to tackling around the waist, etc. But Riney wanted people to be the ball to be cut off at that point in time. The mistake rate probably sort of climbed a little bit in those days because of that situation where they were still desperately trying to get passes away, and it was a 4-tackle rule. And I used to love running close to the big forwards and running off them, or just coming up the blind and taking passes that they didn't have to throw too far, but just allowed me, with some speed, to get through gaps. We had the likes of Merv Hicks, who had great ability to unload the ball. Even when you thought he was on the ground and everything had died, Merv was still able to pop a pass up. And I was more often than not trying to follow Merv, because I knew that if I was nearby, when someone like that is tackled and they're held for a couple of seconds, everything stops. But if you can be on the burst and Merv can get that very delayed pass out to you, well, they've all stopped, and you've got a much better chance then of sort of hitting that line and getting through what used to be only half a gap. It's opened up and it's given. So I used to do that fairly often in those days, and I think that created a lot of opportunities around the rucks, and also to the men out a bit wider. Sometimes we'd have a kicking duel, 2 or 3 kicks, and then to try and wrest the advantage from the opposition, you might get the winger back with you, behind you, put the ball up quite high in the air so that the winger could go through and get the advantage of tackling the person trying to take the ball, or even if you kicked it to a gap, the winger might be able to get through and get the ball before the opposition was able to pounce on it if you positioned it correctly.
We would do anything for Kevin Ryan. He would only say, run through the brick wall, and we would do that. But on the football field, he led by example, and this is what inspired a lot of us young players. We wanted to be like Kevin Ryan, and as much as what we weren't a side that had a lot of stars, we were a side that stuck together and did everything together and did what we were told by Kevin Ryan. And that's one reason why I think that we were successful in 1967.
Could be over. It's a try, a good try by Ron Raper, younger brother of Johnny Raper, Canterbury Bankstown block forward. A good try. There we are, another 3 points to Canterbury. Newtown Jeffries actually kicked that out Canterbury's way then. Out with Toohey. Toohey's still getting up, but pulled down from behind by Moore. Max Brown from the dummy half position. Larkin tosses it to Raper. Tailfield, Toohey, Gartner. Now it's with the brilliant Johns. Nice work, Johns. Goes on with it.
A lot of the coaches in those days didn't want you to kick the ball. But I reckon that that was part of my game, and Kevin gave me licence to do that because kicking the ball and turning the opposition around and making them chase the ball, or just a little chip and you getting through into a space where there was no defence, quite often again set up an attacking move that they found very hard to counter. So Kevin gave me a licence to do that.
He just gave you that much confidence, and I can tell a story to give an example of that. One day we played North Sydney at Belmore Oval, and the front rower from North Sydney, Jim Schroeder, was giving Cole Brown a bit of a hard time, and Kevin said, well, don't do that again. And unfortunately, Schroeder ignored Kevin's advice and put one on Cole Brown's chin. The next minute, Schroeder was on the ground and with a badly twisted nose. Later at the club, Jim Schroeder acknowledged that he was in the wrong and acknowledged the extent of Kevin's power, Kevin Ryan's power.
Warner got a bump on the head then. Now it's Goldspink, a long one to Hicks. Positions Raper. Raper's through. He flew for a nice try, but a head-high tackle made Raper a little groggy as he went down then. But I don't think he cares too much. It was a good try, a heady try by Ron Raper off Hicks, the front row forward.
And there we are. Canterbury have now gone to the lead, 12 points to 10.
And it's a Canterbury ball. Kidd gets it out to Raper. Doyle. This is Greaves that has it now. Gets it on to Gartner. Gartner's twisted a fence. It's going wrong. Taken from behind by Sladden. Gartner's been around football for a long while. He's still got plenty of pace. There's Greaves slicing across field. Get it to Kidd. Kidd soon grabbed by Warner, but he's still got out of it. He's going on. Raper there backing up, has the ball. This is brought play down into North Sydney's 25. Tailford's a dummy half. Canterbury plays the ball and gets it across to Greaves. Greaves props, gives it back to Brown, onto Hicks. A low one that was hard to take for Gartner. Oh dear, and an impossible pass went there to Barry Reynolds on the wing, but now it's back with Doyle. Doyle straightens up and on. North Sydney's 20, cuts through, gets down back to Greaves. Greaves sends a long one across, and it starts a run down the wing there by Hughes, but soon stopped. Kidd switches play and gets it over to Johns, and Johns gets it back then to Doyle, and Tailforth has a poor attempt at field goal. Gudgeon gathers, is now running the ball upfield as runs into a couple of Canterbury players. North Sydney player hurt over there, but Gudgeon gets up to play it. Warner sends it to Weir. O'Brien, Banks, looking around for support, turns it back inside. Keith Russell has it, loses the ball. Raper gathers it and passes it off the ground to Johns, quite legitimate. Johns turns a long one to Tailforth, and Johns gets it away to Gartner. Gartner's brought down around the head by Cole Greenwood. Marking him is Warner. Tailforth sends it across to Raper. Raper looks around, and a low one that was impossible for Hicks to gather. Now it's with Goldspink. Goldspink sends it across field to Cole Brown, the hooker, who's immediately dumped by Banks. Ron Raper, a dummy half, gets it to Hicks, back to Raper again. This is Doyle, utility back, playing 5'8" today. He's played everywhere, this kid Doyle. Half, 5'8", centre wing. Here's Ryan trying to spark the attack. Johns gets it to Gartner. Gartner still again, sends a long one. It's Canterbury flashing down, and Reynolds still going. Back to Johns again. Fourth tackle's coming up, so Canterbury will have to do something with this one. Raper gets it on to Gartner. Now it's with Ryan. Ryan's progress has been stopped. And so the fourth tackle has come, and it's right in front of the North Sydney goal post. O'Brien feeds it to another Canterbury ball. It goes to Raper, who's stood out of his ground. And Raper is about a foot short. Would have taken a double movement to get over. Raper plays the ball to Tailforth, to Ryan, and Ryan goes the barge. Now they'll lift him back over because there's enough North Sydney players there to do it. He's about a half a yard short. Tailforth pointing out to his left, but you can be assured it won't go. And here it goes to Hicks. Sends it on. And a beautiful try on the burst there by the Canterbury Bankstown player, Bob Doyle. Never much doubt about that one. So Doyle goes in for a try and Canterbury Bankstown goes further ahead.
Yes, much further ahead now. 17 points to 10.
Doyle bounces through the opposition there, and Banks is the one that finally stops him. Reeves is in there at dummy half. Gets it back to Kidd. Now it's with Cole Brown, Canterbury's hooker. Schrader pulled him down. Ross Kidd sends a long one to Hicks. Tailforth rather. Back to Hughes, the replacement winger, who goes for a little kick inside. And Irvine's underneath it. Greaves is up there, and Greaves pulls him down and plays only about 6 or 7 yards out from the North Sydney try line. It's gathered by Doyle, and although it was a knock on, the advantage is played, and Doyle is allowed to get up and play this ball for Canterbury Bankstown. Brown's a dummy half. Back to Raper. Raper sends a long one to Kidd. That's on to Goldspink. Oh, Johns is up there and overshot the mark. Hughes was a little bit too far forward to take it. Now Hughes will play the ball back to Kidd. Now it's Raper who's doing a ton of work, as you can see. Greaves. Now it's with Tailforth. Tailforth, as he's on his back, gets it to Greaves. Greaves is on the attack here, and anything could happen. It's with Hicks. Hicks is going like a train, and he's over the line, but loses the ball. Is it a try? Did he ground it first? Yes, it's ruled that way. And so there's a try by Hicks, who was going with all the speed and momentum of a Melbourne Express, going with full ball.
22 points to 10.
In those days, you had to pack for a scrum. A scrum was knocked you around more than any today. They just lay into a scrum. They slow the scrum down today, but in those days, that killed you, you know. And this where a bloke like Kevin Ryan, as an open side prop, he was so strong, you know. He was unbelievable. Even in defence, playing against Kevin, with Kevin, I'd see opposition run to the left to get away from him. So a lot of times they run your side, you'd miss a tackle because you weren't used to it. But that's how strong he was.
We played the Jack Gibson coached Eastern Suburbs in the semi-final.
Referee today is Mr. Cole Pearce. At the moment, the ball being placed on the halfway line by the Eastern Suburbs captain Jim Matthews, 5'8", former Canterbury player and former state player. The match ready to get underway, and there's the kickoff taken by Matthews, a deep one. Goes back towards Johns on the wing, but Johns couldn't get to it. Taken well, and Canterbury now, run out by Barry Reynolds, have made it out about 20 yards. Canterbury Bankstown in possession, 20 yards out from their own line as Kevin Ryan goes bursting through, put down pretty well in front of his own posts. Eastern Suburbs defence as usual, storming up and swarming all over the Canterbury players. Knock-on call there by referee Cole Pearce. Absolutely dumped there just outside the Canterbury 25. Out to Junee. Junee swings it across well, but the Canterbury defence this time coming up like rockets, and the Eastern Suburbs attack on that occasion not able to get going. It's well spearing it to Junee. Junee getting it across field. This time finds Sadler going through, but well taken head on though by Johnny Greaves just outside the Canterbury 25. Back to Ashley. Ashley going ahead, takes a kick ahead. That's a high one. Johns underneath it. Goes high, gets it beautifully, and comes down 10 yards out from his own line, right in front of the posts. Raper kicks ahead. Not much of a kick. I don't think it'll find touch. Yes, it will. A beautiful kick. Oh, a magnificent kick. The angle from here a little bit deceptive. It beat McKean all the way, and the flag raised just inside the Eastern Suburbs half. Another scrum to pack down there. The ball into touch, and so a scrum to pack down right on the Eastern Suburbs 25. Put in by Junee. A Canterbury ball goes to Raper, breaking quickly from the scrum, decides to run. Well covered though, but he makes about 10 yards and play now about 20 yards out from the Canterbury line. Out to Hicks. Ryan, and Ryan's going hard for the line. Whoa, put down there as he had Doyle in support, about 5 yards short of the Eastern Suburbs line. A good, surprising burst of speed. Look out, Eastern Suburbs, as it goes to Hicks, trying to palm off tackles and put down about 10 or 11 yards short. He'll play it this time to Clive Gardner. Kicks it forward there, runs with it. Can't get easy, does get his pass away to Ryan. Ryan's over the line. That could be a try for Canterbury Bankstown. And referee Cole Pearce has signalled a try. Well, that took everybody by surprise. A little earlier, Kevin Ryan had made a very, very determined dash for the line and had been held up the ball at the moment for Eastern Suburbs, coming across to feed this scrum, which is a fairly steady one. Journey to put this ball in for East. Puts it in. It's a East ball. Journey tried to run the blind side, but you could see Kevin Ryan's legs sticking out and he tripped over them. He'll play it to Riley, number 8 for Eastern Suburbs, the lock. Gets it away well to Matthews and across to Sadler, and then across to Grady in the centre. Grady well grasped before he could make more than a yard by Greaves. Sadler again, the dummy half, gets it back here beautifully. East trying everything at this stage. Comes across magnificently to Stevens. Stevens on the wing, decides to run, but he's well caught. Flips it back in field there, and it'll come across to Newman. A long, dangerous sort of a pass to McKean, number 1, who's got it at least, but taken head on and very high there. We'll get up and play this one midway between the East 25 and the halfway line. Goes back to Junee. Junee almost through a tackle, gets his pass away at least. But the Canterbury defence is coming up so very, very quickly that none of these Eastern Suburbs backlines have ever got a chance to really get going. Well, Canterbury hemmed down as Johns takes this clearing kick, gets Canterbury out of trouble as it goes back to McKean, takes it beautifully just inside his own 25, decides to run it out. See how far he can get. He tries to, he throws a bad pass there back to Stevens. Stevens picks it up, taken by Ryan and slammed down on what must be a rock-hard section of the Sydney cricket ground, the cricket pitch area. East in a bit of trouble as Crofton goes through with it now. Throws a bad pass back in field, and East have lost it. Canterbury have regained as Brown fell on it and plays it to Raper just inside the East half across to Hicks, and across to Doyle, Goldspink, and then across to Hagan. Hagan scoring, gets his pass back inside there, but beautiful cover defence brings Barry Reynolds down midway between the East 25 and the halfway line. No doubt about this Eastern Suburbs defence as Greaves decides to run with it now. Tries to go through, but taken on both sides. Will play this one in pretty well the same spot, but a little bit further infield. Played away by Brown. Hicks gets it back inside there. And Goldspink going through as well, put down about 35 yards out from the Eastern Suburbs line. Last tackle against Canterbury Bankstown, and the scrum to pack down 35 yards out. As this scrum packs down, Canterbury have won the scrums 7-4 so far, with about 3 minutes to go to half-time. Journey to feed this one for Eastern Suburbs. It's an Eastern Suburbs ball to Matthews, but the penalty goes to Canterbury Bankstown, and this one well within kicking range for George Tailforth. And into the air. And the fracture. Canterbury Bankstown has gone further ahead and now leads Eastern Suburbs 5 points to 2 with 1.25 minutes to go to half-time.
Johns has shown on 2 or 3 occasions that he's handled the ball, that his line kickings and his rage into the back line can spell disaster for East, but although I feel that East should be able to kick and must kick in the second half, they must keep the ball away from Johns if at all possible. But I feel that Canterbury's lead at half-time of 5-2 is a good one. I think it's good enough to win the game, but I mean, East, we can never say die team, and I feel that they will come out in the second half and give the crowd of this in excess of 50,000 here something to cheer about.
On the scoreboard touchline. Kick ahead, good thinking. It'll go back to Johns, bounces over his head over the Canterbury 25. Runs it up, he's got Reynolds number 2 with him. Gets it to Reynolds, back to Johns. Johns going straight ahead, he's beaten 2 players. Still going, caught by the jersey and eventually slammed down there from behind by Bruce Stewart. Plays it to Hagan. Hagan gets it away well to Tailforth. Straight ahead, can't get his pass clear. He does this time to Raper. Raper with an overhand pass to Greaves. Greaves looks towards the halfway line, gets his pass back. It'll come to Hicks without the number. A long, long pass along the ground, and picking out beautifully, Reynolds comes to Stewart. Stewart puts him down about 6 or 7 yards inside the Eastern Suburbs half. Canterbury on the attack now. Hicks going through. Gets it beautifully here to Goldspink. Goldspink back in turn to Raper. Raper going straight ahead. Can't get his pass away. Last tackle coming up for Canterbury Bankstown about 35 yards out from the Eastern Suburbs line. Out it comes to Hicks again. And across to Ryan. Ryan props, goes back the other way. Back to Hicks. Could be danger here as it goes to Tailforth. Tailforth looks for support. Gets it inside to Hagan. Hagan with a good pass there. Finds Raper. Raper caught. Well swamped. Ashley coming in the headgear has stopped him beautifully. Riley, we notice out of the scrum. It's put in. It's another Canterbury ball. Goes to Doyle. Doyle dummies. Gets it to Raper. Raper dragged down by Hayes. Right on the Eastern Suburbs 25. Playing it there, and it'll come across to Hicks without the number. Flips it back to Hagan. Hagan looks towards the halfway line. Flips a good pass back, but it's almost knocked down. Comes to Tailforth. Tailforth got Reynolds going inside. Finds Reynolds, and Reynolds must time. Canterbury Bankstown has now gone to a lead of 8 points to 2 over. Too far back to have a shot at field goal. Ron Raper maybe if he breaks quickly from the scrum, but I doubt it. And it's Jim Matthews to feed this one for Eastern Suburbs number 6. Puts it in, and it's a Canterbury ball. Goes across there from Hagan, across to Greaves, number 4. Pushes off Grady, gets it inside there beautifully to Gartner. Gartner's flying. Riley goes high and just missed, thank goodness. And he gets to his feet now after being tackled by Hayes 20 yards out. Comes across to Kidd. Kidd doubles back the other way, going through. Flips his pass back there to Greaves. Greaves gets his pass in turn to Doyle. Doyle is caught. Can't get his pass away. Bounces to his feet this time. Looked around for support. And he's about 6 or 7 yards short of the Eastern Suburbs line. Now it comes to Raper. Raper, number 8, looking for the gap. Can't get his pass away as John's backed up. And Johns now will be the dummy half. They're only 10 yards short of the Eastern Suburbs line. Johns to Hicks. The tail forth. Could be a try coming up here as a long one goes out here. Beautiful. Oh, it wasn't an knock-on. Gardner's going over the line. He's put it down. It must be a try. Clive Gardner has gone in for Canterbury Bankstown. And I think that's the kiss of death for Eastern Suburbs with 5 minutes to go to full time. Canterbury Bankstown now have gone to a lead of 11 points to 2 over Eastern Suburbs. Well, here's the kick by Tail, forth in the air, and the flags are up. And so Canterbury Bankstown have gone right ahead now, and now lead Eastern Suburbs 13 points to 2 with...
The following week we played St George in the final.
A crowd at least around about 50,000 people today in beautiful, almost summer weather at the cricket ground, and this match all important to St George. This year they're striving for their 12th successive Rugby League Premiership, a world record. Today they're right up against it. The experts favour St George, but by a very slight margin. The best start you can get on Canterbury Bankstown is 1 point. Just about ready to go now, the Rugby League final for the right to challenge South Sydney in the grand final, St George and Canterbury Bankstown. The clock showing 5 minutes gone in the first half. No points between Canterbury in the dark shorts running left to right and the Premier St George as Preston comes in. This could be the first 2. A good-looking long kick, and the flags go up, and St George have got the lead after 6 minutes play in the first half. St George 2 with a penalty goal by Dennis Preston. Canterbury Bankstown 0. A very tight game, not much in it at this stage as Billy Smith puts this ball in for St George. It's a St George ball. Billy Smith runs with it, gets it to Clay. Clay drops, gets his pass away to Gasney, who takes it high. Chased by Greaves, gets his pass to King. King is tackled by Gardner, and Gardner just happens to virtually make him stumble and fall down. It wasn't a clean tackle. Marked by Raper, gets it to Raper, gets Johnny Raper to Clay. Clay getting it back there, that time to Rasmussen. Rasmussen first clear, comes to Little Johns, pushes him clear. Here he comes through to kick off for Canterbury Bankstown. There's his kick. It goes to the other side of the field. Johnny King is number 5. He'll have to take this one. Takes it 5 yards over his own line. Probably kick, and there goes his kick. Lewis Johns covers it, takes it beautifully, but it goes behind him, gets it on the first bounce. As it did go behind him, kicks himself as he goes into the St George half. It'll go past Gasnier, picked up there by Langlands. Langlands, 10 yards out from his own line, decides to kick. Back that one a bit, taken by Ron Raper on the halfway line. None of St George on side as it goes across there to Hagan. Hagan chased by Beef, and well put down, gets his pass. Oh, it's picked up there. Beautifully by Johnny Raper. Gets his pass to Haddad. Haddad spins it back the other way and finds Rasmussen coming through, and Rasmussen is put down 35 yards out from the Canterbury line. Canterbury are falling apart at the seams at the moment as it comes to Clay. Smith, Haddad. Haddad cuts on the pace once into Johnny Greaves, number 4. The ball's whipped on behind him, picked up by Goldsmith, who's offside, of course. And the penalty goes to St George, and it's awarded midway between the Canterbury 25 and the halfway line. As Preston comes in with a kick midway between the Canterbury 25 and the halfway line, a bit low. And the flags are up. Oh, what a beauty. It looked low all the way, but it's another 2 points for Preston, another 2 points for St George. And St George now starting to run away with this game. Lead Canterbury 9 points to 0 after 23 minutes play in the first half. Right on the St George 25. It'll be a Canterbury ball. A dummy there by Kidd. Decides to run. Gets around. Play still going almost clear there. Eventually tackled by Graham Langlands. Plays it away to Cole Brown to Ryan. Ryan straight ahead, gets his pass back there to Kidd. Kidd tries to get underneath O'Hanlon and cut. They're 10 yards out from the St George line. Cole Brown across to Tarver. Tarver to Hicks. Hicks straight ahead and well caught underneath. The first tackler in was O'Hanlon, and then also Beak came into her. From the dummy half, Kidd goes for the line, and he's over! Another magnificent try scored in this game. This time it's Ross Kidd from the dummy half has darted over to Canterbury Bankstown and right next to the post. And that's whittled down the St George lead to 9 points to 3. Tarver coming in. This will be his third attempt in the air. The flags are up, and so Canterbury Bankstown a bit closer to St George. St George now lead Canterbury 9 points to 5. There's the kick. And Dartford has let that one go in a touch on the full. Well, lots of beat behind that kick, but it went far too far. Preston came in from the wing to take the kick. The penalty, of course, awarded from the centre of the halfway line to Canterbury Bankstown. This is from the halfway line. If you can get this one over, there'll only be 2 points the difference as he comes in at St George 9, Canterbury 5. Lots of power, lots of distance. It's not bad, the flags are up. And right from the centre of the halfway line, George Tarver has landed a goal for Canterbury Bankstown, and the score now, St George 9, Canterbury 7. Put in by Smith, another Canterbury ball out to Doyle. Greaves, Hagan. His winger Reynolds is much too wide. He couldn't get in position. It goes back here to Doyle. Doyle looks for the gap, goes inside, goes there. Chase to get his pass to Hagan. Hagan's going for the line out to Reynolds. Reynolds is over the start line. Canterbury Bankstown 10, St George 9, and the kick will come from about 6 yards to the left of the post.
It wasn't a very good week for myself because I had a groin injury and I had a couple of painkillers prior to the game at half-time.
It's a Canterbury ball to Doyle. Over Hagan's head, picked up by Greaves, and Greaves is broken clear. Looks for the ball now, and he's got Barker with him. He's going hard for the corner. Looks for Barker, comes inside first, and eventually put down by King. That's the fast ball that Barker couldn't quite get his hands onto. It's gone into touch, and a sprung out of back out about 10 yards out from the St George line. Yep. That's the sort of play St George need at the moment. Johnny Raper, the dummy half. Swings it to his right to Clay, then across to Billy Smith, then to Pollard. Pollard's got a bit of a gap here and he's flying for the line. Admiral Johns gets him low, gets it back to Raper, back to Beath. Beath is flying for the line and he's grasped about a yard short. The ball's loose, Beath still has it, he won't go down, and the referee has called for him to play the ball. Beath plays it away, it's bounced off a Canterbury player. Let's see what will happen with a penalty here to St George. Canterbury were offside, the ball bounced off a Canterbury player. Dennis Preston ready. If he puts it over, St George back in the lead by a point and maybe into the grand final, but there's a long way to go yet. Here comes Dennis Preston, and it's a good-looking kick. The flags are up, and St George are back into the lead. St George now go to a lead of 11 points to 10. George Evans to feed this one for the Premiers. 22, and a penalty awarded to Canterbury Bankstown. Again, within kicking range for George Tarver. I'll be surprised if he doesn't have a shot from here. There's plenty of time to go, but has always kicked pretty close to the posts. As he comes in, he could put Canterbury Bankstown back into the lead by a point at the moment. It's St George 11, Canterbury 10. Lots of height and distance, could be a close one. And the flags are up, and Canterbury's back in the lead. The crowd sensing a Canterbury victory, although there's only 1 point in it still. Put in by Evans, ball in there somewhere. It's the St George ball to Clay. They might still pull it out of the fire as it goes to Gasnier. Gasnier with a long one to Pollard. Pollard looks inside, a bit of a gap coming up, kicks in field. After it is Ron Raper. The bounce, I think, will favour him, and it does so. Oh, a bit of a shove it back there. It's the referee let go, and Ron Raper runs it out. Tries to get through, and he does so. But no play. Halfway towards the halfway line. Eventually put down by Walsh. Midway between the Canterbury 25 and the halfway line. Referee did miss a rather bad piece of shepherding further back. Les Johns trying to go through and get through 2 tackles. Kicks now for the line over Johnny King's head. It's going to beat him, I think. I'm sure it'll roll into touch. Yes, and the flag goes up. Oh, what a magnificent kick by Les Johns. The flag has been raised 10 yards from the St George line. 49,941. Half of them stunned, but St George have won the ball. This could be it as Raper tries to burst his way clear, and he's put down 20 yards out from his own line. They've got a minute, St George, to pull this game out of the fire as it goes to Clay, out to Gasnier, to Smith. Smith looks for the gap. He's not quite clear. Good diving tackle by Greaves, puts him down just short of the 25. straight away by Huddard. Back there to Rasmussen. Rasmussen tries to get a pass clear, and he does so to Evans. Evans up over the 25, but well put down, not marked, decides to run. Doyle gets onto him and puts him down 35 yards out centre field. 20 seconds to go to full time as it goes to Gasnier. Kicks ahead and chases through after it, and it's Hagan can't get to it. Dived on there by Hughes. Good diving, a saving dive by Hughes, and Hughes is both clear, and he's thrown. The referee has blown his whistle. The referee has blown his whistle for the forward pass. We're seeing rugby league football history. The great St George run has come to an end. 11 consecutive premierships, and the 12th one just won't be there because they're down by 1 point. And unless a miracle occurs out of this scrum, they can't win this game. The miracle won't occur. Ross Kidd has it. He's put down on the ground. The referee has said it's all over, and Canterbury Bankstown has done the impossible and knocked the famous St George side out of the Rugby League Premiership in 1967.
It was a jubilant moment for us in the dressing rooms, and we could only think about the glory of playing in a grand final. First grand final for a terrible lot of us because we were only young kids in those days, but then having a brother play with St George and played with him for so long, I looked at the sad side of it too. I said to myself, I've got to go and see my brother, who was in the other dressing room at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Went and saw him, sat down with John, and he just said, well, son, he said, you deserve to be there.
If Ronnie Raper hadn't had the surname Raper, he'd have gone to England in 1967 Kangaroos, but you couldn't have had two Rapers because his brother John, of course, was going there anyway.
At the end of the game, there were two definite sections in the crowd. One section looked like they'd been to a funeral, very, very, very quiet, and the other section had been to a wedding.
It wasn't expected, and naturally we were elated that we'd made the grand final.
And of course the following week was the big one. South Sydney had been a pretty consistent team all the year, and they were probably went in as the favourites, and it was a big crowd, huge crowd there that day. Beautiful conditions for playing football, a bit overcast, a little bit of sun but a bit overcast, and the ground was nice and soft, so everything was set.
This direct broadcast by 2KY from the Sydney Cricket Ground of the Rugby League Grand Final between South Sydney and Canterbury Bankstown features 2KY's international football commentator, Tiger Black.
Now, word from one of the proudest men in rugby league, Eddie Byrne. Eddie's been through the mill, one of the first players with Canterbury, saw the great times, seen the lean times, and now you must feel very happy with your present side, and on top of that, as the chairman of the side right on top. Eddie Burns, my old favourite.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Tig, when you said I'm a proud man. I am a proud man. See Canterbury Bankstown in the grand final today. It's been a long while, 25 years. We've got a well-balanced back this side. The boys are full of confidence. We're not like South Sydney, overconfident. It leads to complacency. But I'm sure the best side will win today, and I hope it's a good, hard, clean game of football, no one injured, and it's Canterbury that comes out on top.
This broadcast goes to the boys at Vietnam, and there's plenty in your Canterbury Bankstown area. We're listening today. Kevin gave his say-so, followed by your theme song. Have you got a message for them?
Yes, boys in Vietnam, I wish you all the best. Hope everything's going all right for you over there, and hope we can do the right thing for you today. And one more time, up the Berries. I know you'll all be waiting for this victory, and we won't let you down.
I think if you have a look at the South Sydney pack, you'll find only one bloke that didn't make it international. They had John O'Neill, John Sattler and Elwyn Walters, three internationals in their front row. They had Bobby McCarthy, international in the second row, and they had Ronnie Curt-Lock, international. So I think our forwards to hold them, which they did on that day, I think it's just tribute to the blokes of likes of Merv Hicks, Kevin Ryan, Cole Brown, Ronnie Raper, George Tailforth and Kevin Goldsmith.
Long bottom kick-off deep into Canterbury territory. Ron Raper gathers and with the wind at his back kicks downfield to put Souths under immediate pressure just outside their own 25. Sim's attempt to run the ball out is foiled by Tailforth's smothering tackle as Canterbury set the pattern of their play. Dummy half Coote gets the back line moving, giving Souths an opportunity to use their greater speed. But with well-positioned cover defence, Canterbury chop off the attack. Through their forwards, Souths test the close-in defence, but that too is solid as Canterbury move up on their man with Tailforth and Kidd prominent. Being used as an attacking force, pacey forward McCarthy probes the weaknesses. His elusive running threatening danger. Canterbury make good use of the ball. Their international centre Greaves beating his opposite number to create openings with clever changes of pace. Jones and Coote take him, but Coote is warned for punching just outside South's 25. A lapse that could prove costly, as Canterbury's kicker Tailforth has landed 95 goals during the season. This one makes it 96, as Canterbury takes a 2-0 lead inside the first 5 minutes. James beats Ryan and Hicks as South's counter-attack. His kick towards the corner sparks off a thrilling race for the ball, which is won by right winger Cleary within sight of Canterbury's line. Canterbury are penalised, and Sims, the Premiership's leading point scorer, who broke Harry Barth's goal-kicking record of 108 goals in a season, evens the score at 2-all. In their traditional style, founded over 50 years ago by coach Arthur Hennessy, Souths swing the ball about. Lyles pass to Moses, giving the strong running centre room to move. Moses' dummy confuses the defence, and they hang off as he spears through. Using sharp passing rushes, featured by their moving onto the ball, Souths penetrate as fullback Longbottom comes up endeavouring to create an overlap. The experienced Greaves has him covered, but Souths are poised for an all-out attack as backs and forwards combine to breach the defence and into Canterbury's 25. McCarthy whips the ball to James, who steps inside, but is grounded just short of the line. From the play the ball, dummy half O'Neill goes over for the opening try. Souths lead 5-2. In an exciting game of changing fortunes, Canterbury narrow the gap as Raper, younger brother of the famous Johnny, drop kicks a goal. Souths 5-4. Raper to Johns, but he's taken by Moses and Sims. South's defence is hard to break, and Canterbury search for any looseness in their line by using their forwards in crashing runs. In passes to Ryan, who makes ground, but is met by heavy treatment. O'Neill is called out and warned for punching, and Canterbury are awarded a penalty right in front. It's an easy one for Tailforth, who brings up his second century of points for the season, and Canterbury hit the punt 6-5. Another penalty to Canterbury, with Tailforth to take the kick. It's there all the way for Canterbury to increase their advantage. It's 8-5.
A couple of highlights in the game that I do remember was being tackled by Ronnie Coote, running down the sideline. Looked like I might have been able to get to the line, but Coote knocked me over. It was a very close game.
But on this occasion, we'd swung the ball across one side, and then suddenly on a certain call, we reversed it. And it went through 2 sets of hands and into the hands of a waiting Bobby McCarthy. And away he went and scored the winning try for South.
Between the posts, his 13th try of the season.
I just want to say that over the years it's annoyed me that people remember the person that threw the pass for the McCarthy intercept, but when you ask them who won the scrums, they've got no idea. And I've always wanted to pay tribute to Cole and through all the other players, because I know we all felt exactly the same, that we certainly didn't blame Cole in any way whatsoever. Rather, we were appreciative that his ball-winning skills and his general play, not only in the grand final but throughout the season, had put us in a position that we could easily have won the grand final.
Jones is penalised for not putting the ball in straight, and Canterbury have a chance to equalise scores through the confident Tailforth. His aim is true, and it's 10-all.
There was a goal kicked by Kevin Longbottom, their long-range goal kicker that did go over the post. I was standing underneath the post. It was a penalty goal, and one linesman put his flag up, one down, and I caught the ball under the post, and Pearce ruled no goal, so I just picked the ball up and headed towards the 25. I wasn't going to. It was like I don't walk when I play cricket and get caught behind, so I wasn't going to walk then. and let them know that it was a goal. But that was, so I suppose you might say in that situation that, well, South well and truly deserved, they would have been unlucky to lose. But I thought that as the game progressed, we were probably getting a bit stronger than they were, and had it gone into extra time, had it gone a bit longer, we might have knocked them off, but we'll never know that.
Kidd carries on, and although held by Scott, gets the ball to Raper. But Souths move up quickly in defence to keep Canterbury in their own half. Kidd feeds the forwards. Hicks passes to Goldspink, sending the second rower through until Moses and James bring him to earth. With the 4-tackle rule ensuring a good share of the ball to both sides, Souths come back.
South Sydney won the game 12-10. As much as what we'd like to be the victors, South Sydney were the better side on the day. Having lost 12-10, it wasn't a disgrace.
Right between the posts for Souths to go to a 12-10 lead. Raper tries for a field goal in the closing seconds, but it's short and wide, and Longbottom runs the ball out, being brought down in front of the goal mouth as the hooter blasts out the end of the game. Souths win 12-10.
The same group that played in that grand final, for about the last 10 years now, we've gathered every weekend, or Caulfield Cup weekend. There's a few punters amongst us. Every Caulfield Cup weekend we get together again and have with our wives and have a weekend somewhere to just well, keep our relationships going, because we've well and truly got over the loss, but they're a great bunch of blokes.
It was an honour to play under Kevin Ryan, because I can remember that year when he was studying for his law degree, and he would lock himself in his house at home or in a little shack down the bottom of his backyard at Lugano, and he would stay in there for hours and hours and hours to study. Come out and coach us, come out and play, go back and do that. He was a very, very dedicated man.
This club owes so much to Kevin Ryan for what he taught us about how to win and how to win the right way.
Picks up, moves up towards the halfway mark, and is effectively tackled by Elman Walters, the South Sydney hooker. Goldspink in the ruck half position, clears the ruck with a pass to Kevin Ryan. Running off Kevin Ryan is Ronnie Raper. Ronnie Raper is well and truly covered, marked in the play the ball by Ivan Jones. Gold Brown, the Canterbury hooker, clears the ruck with a pass to Mervyn Hicks, who gave his pass to Ryan. Ryan gave it across field, but it's backed up and picked up by Greaves, the centre three-quarter. Greaves is tackled by Norgard. No Cleary on the field to play the reshuffle. Third tackle signal against Canterbury. It's gone out to Kevin Ryan. On it goes to Mervyn Hicks to the halfback Kidd, who dropped it behind him. And the referee says play. A bit of interference takes place here too. Yeah, Jimmy Lyle interfered with the Canterbury player who hadn't touched the ball. Well, Talsford moves in this 50-yard kick, and there she goes. What's it going to be? And both flags are up. A magnificent 50-yard kick, and the score from the Sydney Cricket Ground is 10-all between South Sydney and Canterbury Bankstown. And Longbottom drove it down towards Gartner's right wing three-quarter formation. He comes up towards James, and James is there to tackle him right round the bootlaces. But the ball's played back to Les Johns, who gave it out to Ronnie Raper. Raper stepped away for attempt of tackle, broke away, but James was there to grab him by one leg to tackle him. And from the play the ball, picking up is Les Johns, who turned the ball out to Kevin Ryan. Kevin Ryan charging through like a bull in a china shop is upended. The referee signals the third tackle, and he's played the ball back to the hooker of Canterbury's Kyle Brown, who gave it back to Les Johns, who picked it off the ground nicely. Johns is challenged there by Scott and brought down, played 40, 35 yards away, nullified by the fourth tackle from the Canterbury Bankstown line. Oh, look at that scrum, very close to the sideline. Nevertheless, Canterbury have won. It's gone to Kidd. Out it goes to Hagan. To Johns. No, he's cut out Johns with a high pass over there, taken by Reynolds. And Barry Reynolds, the left wing three-quarter of Canterbury Bankstown, is brought down by Eric Sims' good full-blooded tackle. Just on dead set, 10 minutes to go, and Johns gave his pass out to Ronnie Raper. Ronnie Raper stepped away from Scott, makes the ball of the job, taken very nicely by Les Johns, who comes up towards Coote. Could be a penalty here. Coote runs to Johns. It's kicked through by Longbottom. And it's won by Canterbury. And it's gone out to Ross Kidd, who gave it out to Hagan. Hagan moving over field, gave it out to Greaves. Greaves charges downfield, just in a minute and a half to go. Greaves held by one leg, playing his heart out, trying to tear downfield. It's upended and brought down by Norgard with the ball played back to Gartner. From Gartner to Les Johns. Out it goes to Kidd, who cut out Hicks with a pass going out to Hagan. Hagan turns the ball back to Big Goldspink, who charges down, gives an overheader, which is taken by Talbot. Talbot turns the ball back to Kidd. This is the last rally for Canterbury, and it's gone out towards Doyle, the 5'8". Doyle stepped away from Jimmy Lyle. They're putting on a great belated effort here, trying to pull the game out of the bag. But old Father Time's going to be the factor here, as the ball's picked up by Cole Brown, the hooker, who gave it back to Ronnie Raper, who attempts a field goal, and there it goes. Of no avail. It's taken by Longbottom in his own touch and goal area. The ball's gone back to Sattler. Sattler gave it away to Eric Sims. Sims is chased by Cole Brown, but puts his boot to the ball, which is taken by Raper. Having a great game out here this afternoon, Ronnie Raper. Ronnie Raper about 30 yards from his own line, plays the ball back to Cole Brown, who clears the ruck with a pass to Kevin Ryan to Les Johns, who gave it away to Goldspink. Goldspink moving out, cramps his winger for room, and gave it out to the wing three-quarter Gartner. Gartner's quickly tackled. Canterbury half possession. Les Johns in the dummy half position. Gave his pass away to Kevin Ryan. Kevin Ryan back to Johns. Johns full of running. Turned the ball out towards Hagan. Sattler, I should say Hagan has it now. Hagan moving downfield. Stepped out of attempt to tackle it. Makes the ball to the job, and it's gone to Les Johns. Johns has moved downfield. And he's put on the ground, but flings it away. And it's picked up by Greaves. Greaves moving as far as he can. Gave the ball to Kevin Ryan, who's dropped it. It's locked in the tunnel, but picked up by the Canterbury lock in Raper, who turned the ball across field, and racing downfield is Ross Kidd, the Canterbury Banks down 5'8". He stepped away from Longbottom and barreled from behind by Jimmy Lyle.